Welcome back to the Imperial 80s. I was gonna, you know what I should have just done? I was just gonna go Roxanne as we came in.
Because he doesn't even say the words.
That is such an 80s, and I don't know if I know that kids today must sing well, like, listening to music on their headphones and not being able to hear themselves. But I I don't know why, like, for me I mean, obviously that was my childhood, but
Uh,
there's like video of me, somewhere like singing all the lyrics to the Dirty Dancing soundtrack when I'm like 5 or 6 years old, like just going in with the Walkman.
I
So
mean, you.
there's
I mean, you see it on the train here in New York, man. I ain't gonna lie. Someone's just like, they got the on, and they're just,
yeah,
and now it's all stunting music. So you're hearing your I don't know who are the big people now. This is where I'm being old. I'm really
NBA
sick.
young boy or something
Yeah,
like
NBA
that.
young
Like
boy. Okay, yeah. I can't even like grab a name really quick. I'm so bad at it. That's how I know I'm old.
yeah,
And
we're
my
really
daughter's not
old.
old enough to know any of this shit, so I can't get any of the references from her. So it's like really difficult for me to be relevant.
Yeah, my oldest won't let me in on his world enough to know, but my youngest, I get most of my stuff from my 8-year-old. He keeps me
Okay. Okay.
keeps me up to date with the times. But then he'll say something, and then the oldest will be like, "That was last year, man. Like, what's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, no, no, no. I mean, but no, it's true. Like, I think there is something definite of the Walkman, the headphone, the get lost, and just sing a song because especially when you're dealing with vocal music and you can't really sing. If you don't have a singing voice, you're gonna do a kind of. So-
I mean, I actually, you're right. There's something specific. I mean, one is that like before that, they did have headphones that you could like plug in to your stereo or your
it's true.
turntable, right? But nobody was walking around with a portable music device that had headphones prior to the Walkman. Like it really was like revolutionary in that respect.
Hmm.
And so I think there probably was something kind of specific about that era of people then starting to like bring music with them and sing along to it. And you can't hear your own voice because they're not monitors or whatever. Like you can't hear your own voice. So you don't know that you're like crazy off key or off pitch. And the people who are listening are like, what is he doing?
Oh
Whereas
man.
I feel like kids nowadays are probably a little more self-conscious because there's like generations that have come before them that have the headphone experience and either
Yeah.
make fun of them immediately or whatever else and spoil the gag. So yeah, but
But there is that
anyway.
moment where like you get lost. Like if
Oh
it's
yeah.
like the track you really love, and then you get embarrassed. You're like really in it, right? And then you look and someone's looking at you like, oh, you really gone in. I mean, I've had it. I've had it, some old doomed jumps on or like, oh man, that's my cut. And I get into it. I'm sorry bopping, and then like 1 minute later, I'm looking on the train and someone's looking at me like, go in, have fun.
I do miss that part of the MTA experience for sure.
Yeah.
Uh Except that we have like 2 lines and it's a different vibe for sure when you go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But there are people, yeah, I have seen people losing their minds to Meek Mill and stuff like that
Mhm.
on the train in Philly. So
Mhm. Mhm.
anyway, um, but in New York, it's just different because you go everywhere I mean, the subway is just the way that you go through the city, you know?
It's pervasive. It's everywhere, man. You can't
Yeah,
escape it even if you tried.
no. I wouldn't want to, but yes, I understand
Yeah,
why.
no, I'm not a
Some
bus
people might.
person. I rarely take the bus. I have to take the bus 3 times a week as part of my route to get to campus. But other than that, I'm a I'm a train person.
Yeah.
To get me to take the bus is a project. You have to really sell me to take the bus.
Yeah, there was one commute I had to take when I was working in Co-op City that I had to take the bus, but other than that,
Co-op City. Shout out. Shout out.
yeah, I was living in Pelham Parkway at the time.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's not
Yeah, and you could
bad.
only do that via the bus, right? Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bronx geography.
All right. So this movie is a trip, it
Yeah.
really is. Um,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't make this movie today. But
No, you
also,
couldn't.
like, yeah, I mean, I have a lot
But in
of
ways they
thoughts
try
about it.
to, though, also. In ways
Oh,
they
sure.
try to. And we'll talk about it, that it's a essential archetypal film. Um in terms of like its character kind of formations and so forth and so on. But I think the kind of Walter Hill logic that exists within the film, they've definitely like pared down. But in other ways, I just think it's so embedded that the same kind of bombastic way that he kind of would make movies, you don't really see anymore. And I'm not saying I want that again because we'll talk about my feelings around this movie.
Yeah. So just early stuff. I definitely saw this movie as a kid. I don't know if I would have seen it in the 80s, which I might have. It would have been like the television version of it, which is not as um,
Right.
would been edited, of course, in certain ways. And that's a really interesting. I mean, I know we've talked about that before, but I do think that's a really interesting dynamic of what we grew up with. There was like obviously if you had a bootleg copy or if you rented a movie, or you had access to HBO or whatever, um, you could get the unedited version of these in, the 80s as kids. But a lot of times, that secondary kind of market of stuff being on either network TV or then this kind of, burgeoning set of cable channels, whether it was like USA or TBS or TNT or
Mhm.
Comedy Central. This movie was
Mhm.
definitely on Comedy Central a few times. I remember watching it on that. Um, that, that was often kind of where I would catch a lot of these movies growing up, because it was like something that I might have had access to a little bit easier. Um, my parents probably wouldn't pay as much attention to it. But I saw this movie, and I saw it a number of times, and I mean, it was probably for me, other than the Beverly Hills Cop series, which I grew up with. Um, this and the sequel were a couple of my favorite, kind of Eddie Murphy movies growing up.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so I definitely remembered it. There are definitely things about it upon rewatch, which we'll dig into that. And I remembered the racism of the movie. Like I remembered Nolte's character and the Confederate bar and all that kind of stuff. Um, although that's the racism in the movie, which is also a little bit different than the racism of the movie.
Yeah.
But there's a whole bunch that as upon rewatch that I of thoughts I have about it that I would have never thought about really when I was growing up watching it. So we'll get into that in a minute. But what about you? What were your early experiences with this film?
So it's another that I can't tell you the first time I saw it. I mean, I've said it before. Eddie Murphy was a big deal in my house and for me, very young. Um, the Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 was watched a lot. Golden Child, which we should do. That's a very weird, effed up movie that Eddie did. Um, and all those in Coming to America. And then I eventually 48 Hours was always known, probably because my parents, as the mature film that my parents wouldn't like overtly let me watch. But I had a lot of like uncles who had you know, VHS and things like that. So I probably eventually snuck my way in seeing it before I probably was even 10. The film always had a characteristic of being very dark and like aggressive, and it bothered me in a way that excited me because I was a young boy. So I would engage with it, not knowing that there were like social relations that were being depicted in the film that I was probably having some kind of, instinctual understanding that there's something here that's making you uncomfortable and you should probably investigate it, but I had no tools and no one was talking to me about it. In my teens, I probably continued to engage with it, and I began what I did with, I think, with a lot of other movies, whereas I never identified, and we'll talk about this with Nick Nolte's character. I only identified with Reggie, but I always kind of knew that was like incomplete because of what Reggie went through in the movie. But like I said, I had no grammar for it. So I stayed with it. And like it became part of like my Eddie Murphy watches. And again, like I said, when I was like a teenager to like maybe even like my early 20s, it's like throwing in all the Eddie Murphy movies before like his first big fall, which would be like what, around the mid 90s, early 90s. Um, I would watch it all the time. I would like watch these movies, whenever I could. When I got into my 20s, maybe late 20s, and I started doing a lot more looking at film analysis, I discovered an essay that we'll talk about a little bit by Manthea Diawara about Eddie Murphy, and it is called Eddie Murphy, Black Spectatorship, Problems of Identification and Resistance. Now, I discovered this essay not looking for anything around Eddie, but it had to do with a response to a very famous essay that I don't like very much by Laura Mulvey. She was the 70s, I think the 70s, maybe 60s, film critic who uh, created this idea of like spectatorship. And it was like based on a kind of Lacanian and Freudian analysis of cinema spectatorship, feminism that she was trying to kind of, and it became very popular. It and I didn't know this then. Really, what it is actually it became kind of a rejection towards more Marxist film analysis, which in kind of the postmodernist kind of way became very popular as a way to kind of look at film. Diawara wrote an essay on Black spectatorship where he complicates what she writes. Diawara is not a Marxist, but he was definitely well, he's still alive actually. Is I shouldn't say was. So he's still around. I don't think he's doing much. He's very old. Um, but as a kind of basically saying this is sufficiently incomplete what she's doing here because of how it doesn't understand blackness and the kind of spectatorship of subjected classes. Diawara has really good work. So I studied that. I read this essay and I was really into it, and it flipped me because it said, "Oh shit, the things that are happening with Eddie, I'm experiencing." Because he talked about the resistant spectator, meaning that like because of how it kind of goes into stuff around Nolte and Eddie, that black people will have this kind of resisting to what's happening because it doesn't match with our world experiences. So what he kind of hints at, and I wish he would have went further in this piece, is that what happens there is many kind of different roads happen with that people end up like compartmentalizing it, like kind of when I make my joke about Clubber Lang that the movie turns off. I'm kind of expressing that like I literally shut off the narrative after a certain things happens, or like another big one is the he doesn't talk about it, he mentions it briefly, is when you talk about Baldwin's analysis of the Defiant Ones And when Baldwin talks about the Defiant Ones, which are Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis, he said that he tells the story about when he went to see it and black people were just like, boo. Like they just wouldn't accept the ending. So you become a resistant spectator. You basically just don't accept what's happening. So I said to myself, there was a part of me that was always resisting 48 hours. So I was kind of making my own version of it in my head and my experience. So that became a very provocative idea for me. I was really into it. Granted, I like his analysis. There's like other ways that you can kind of take it that I think is really good. Um, he also talks about the color purple in it. We won't go down that rabbit hole right now. And he compares it also to Birth of a Nation, which is what he says is like one of the first examples of resistant spectatorship, because what happened, black people did not accept the narrative. They protested it, right? They said, no, this is a narrative that is racist and it is imperialist, and we're not going to accept it. So I actually began to teach elements of this film, mainly the bar scene, their subsequent fight after, and other things. I actually have a thing on my Patreon where I break down the kind of shots of it. Actually, if you're a Patreon member, you can look at it of it. So I've had a long relationship to this movie. That's kind of gone a long while, and we'll talk about it. Like it's a way that I look at I have like three ways that I look at it, kind of the movie itself and like kind of what it kind of does and how it orients people to kind of understanding identification and who we should kind of go for and the things that can happen. Another actually has to do with Eddie himself, because there's a way that Eddie's first movie, in a way, kind of explains his entire career as a kind of like a captive person who's been like who's every now and then let off the leash and then like yanked back, you know. And then there's a kind of broader also just like film world thing where 48 hours, and I think we probably mentioned it in the Lethal Weapon episode, I think we did, is a real bridge movie from the 70s into the 80s, where it has characteristics of the 70s, but it also ushers in particular like logics of the 80s that become mainstays. And Jay and I were talking about this a little bit before we go on, that are like still here and but diluted, of course, or reconstructed or reformed or reimagined. So in that way, I think it's a mighty important film. Someone asked if they should watch it. I'm going to say, if you're interested in film history and understanding where we are, you kind of can't not. I have to admit it. You just kind of can't not see it. It could bother you. You could enjoy aspects of it. That's not so much what I want to say is, but if like you're in like a kind of like film studies kind of way, you kind of gotta like wrestle with it a little bit, because like it's like all of the there's so many things that it touches on to that I think are just super important.
I agree. Yeah, and when we get into this a little bit more, I mean, I think this film does some really deeply nefarious things as a piece of propaganda, um, that are, much beyond. I mean, this is kind of the point I was saying about Nick Nolte. Like, I agree with you. I mean, I don't think a lot of white people. I mean, I'm sure certain white people relate to Nick Nolte, but like that was never a thing for me and my friends growing up. We, even as white kids, would have watched it for Eddie Murphy and known that Nick Nolte is this racist piece of shit, kind of. But so actually, like the racism of Nolte or in the bar, um, are really not as important, I don't think, to me as some of the things that this film is doing narratively. And a lot of that narrative work is still with us in very strong ways. But I don't want to say it started, because I don't think it's quite an origin point, but it's maybe like kind of a condensation or a distillation of something that then becomes, yeah, Lethal Weapon, Rush Hour, on and on, like these buddy films, And I think in some ways by looking at this as the origin point in certain ways, not I don't origin point's too strong, but as like maybe it's groundbreaking in this kind of field. You can see what's going on in the tamed down versions of it, you know. If you think of Murtaugh as captive, right, in Lethal Weapon or something like that, right? Um, yeah, I mean it's a it's a style of film that allows for a lot to kind of be unsaid, and still taught or propagandized. And yeah, I have more to say on this before we get into it, but why don't we give some time for some of the people that are involved to talk about
Yeah.
this? We get the Joel Silver Industrial Complex here again.
Yeah. So this is kind of like one of the jump starts of the Joel Silver Industrial Complex or Imperial Complex. I probably better. Sorry that if you hear the sirens outside, but they're coming. Um, Joel Silver and the other guy is Lawrence Gordon.
For some reason, my 8-year-old, when he hears sirens, says, "Oh no, I don't want to go back." And I'm like, where did you learn this?
What movie did you watch? That's very
Yeah.
48 hours.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh no. So Lawrence Gordon, who we've also mentioned before, screenwriter, he Silver says that, and I think this is very informative, that Gordon had the idea in the 70s. It was much different. Um it kind of evolved or devolved, right? But it was one of his like things that he had kind of been playing around for a long time. And if you know about Gordon's work, and then also Walter Hill, which we'll get into in a minute, they're really into these kinds of street stories, edges of society stories. Gordon like produced like oh my god, someone's calling me. The John Dillinger film. Let me turn this off. Um, hold on, do not disturb. Okay, yeah, like the John Dillinger movie. This becomes a kind of major part of their kind of oeuvre, right? They're really into this like side stories, Manichaean kind of look at the world. It's interesting that they didn't get super popular in the 70s because the 70s was dealing with this kind of like defeatist individual cinema, things like Five Easy Pieces, this kind of, real people. And then you had your like fringe like Death Wish movies, or you had a couple of things like The Getaway, which is what Walter Hill, I think he worked on it as a producer. So you had these kind of like fringy things on the side, but like they weren't like the popular films as much as like, these like stories. If it became violent, it had to be like Taxi Driver, a kind of psychological tale, right? They still made movies and they did things for a while, and then going into the 80s as the shift began to happen towards a more kind of hard nose action film, right? And we'll get into how this exists in this movie. The stuff that Gordon and Silver and Walter Hill wanted to do became very fashionable, and they were able to kind of, in many ways, set the trends. Like they're really important, especially when you see what Silver does in the late 80s with like Lethal Weapon and Die Hard. He becomes a part of it. So this is like a real essential like grounding point for them, right? So he's like Gordon like had the idea, right? I have a quote here. Oh, this is actually from Hill, which I'll get to in a minute. Actually, I'll go to the quote in a minute. To your point, Jay, it is often credited as the first buddy cop movie. They say that there's others that precede it, but I think what they might be saying is because of its success, and we know this thing about Hollywood is when something has a success, then you just go into an agent's office and you reference that movie. So then it becomes the reference point for what you want to do. Granted, calling it a buddy cop movie and Eddie Murphy's character is not a cop is very interesting, but we can get to that. So Walter Hill, Gordon, and Silver have been working together for a while. Getting into Walter Hill. So Walter Hill, interesting guy. If you read his bio, it's really this like tough guy of movie shit that always annoys the living hell out of me. He has this thing where he was like, I never liked kid films. Right? He says the first movie he remembers watching is Song of the South. That's very informative, Walter. So yeah, and then but he talks about that he wanted, but he also liked movies that moved a lot, that had a lot of like action. He said he was into musicals. He wanted things, he liked spectacle, right? He wasn't really into the kind of psychological stuff that was so prominent in the 70s, which is interesting because he got pushed to do more psychological stuff quasi in this movie. But he didn't like that, right? He started off as like an assistant director for a lot of movies for a long time. Then he went into um producing as well. And after a time, he basically, waited out a little bit and he was able to start directing. Mm. And he gets into his first movie is a movie called Hard Times, and it stars Charles Bronson, right? And if you know anything about Bronson at that time, Bronson was the kind of center conservative favorable actor for people who didn't really want to watch the more liberal, or, and I put these in quotations because a lot of this stuff, or left things, because like a lot of these are floating signifiers that anyone with true left politics can watch these movies and go, it's not really left, right? But what was kind of perceived in that way. So he does a movie called Hard Time. It's like a jail movie. I saw it a long time ago. I don't remember it. Um, and then he did it. But the first movie that he does that we all know, which we missed by a year, so we can't do it, is The Warriors. Made in
I feel
79.
like I feel like we're gonna have to do a special
We,
episode about the
we might
Warriors
just
at
have to
some
grab
point
it.
because
We might just have to
yeah,
grab it. Yeah, because it influenced so much. So The Warriors becomes a big thing for Hill. And if you remember The Warriors is this film about, the sides of the earth, the scourgy, urchins of the earth and all the type of stuff on like the sides of New York City and all this type of stuff. This very dark visual tone, right? Um, this like constant feel of like anxiety of like living in the city, and it becomes a real big part of like his general feel of all his movies. He has another movie that I actually think we really have to do called Southern Comfort that comes up before this. Southern Comfort is, I don't really want to get into it, but that's another film that he does, and you begin to see kind of his stuff. But then 48 Hours then becomes, I think, his biggest movie. I'm pretty sure it's bigger than The Warriors. It's like a huge movie. And he does this, but this is
definitely
yeah.
bigger than the Warriors in like blockbuster, in like money
Blockbuster?
terms and
Yeah,
all that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't look at it, but yeah, I imagine so. Yeah, Hill had this like quote that I thought was interesting. Interesting. He says the story is a traditional urban thriller. Two terrible guys are out there and have to be brought down. But even though I enjoy working in genres, the point is to always explode them or give them a transfusion. So I made a very conscious decision to go with the elements of personality of the two players rather than be overly genuflective to the narrative. Thrusting a white policeman and a black convict together carries so much gravity that we didn't have to beat the white black thing to death. If it works, it's because of the actors' personalities. Yeah.
They did beat it to death. Come
They
on.
did beat it to death, which is like really weird. But I think this has to do with like kind of his like social unconscious. I Hill, I just experience. I mean, I think I think Hill's a racist that he doesn't even realize it. I've just said this. I have an anecdotal story about someone who worked with him on the Warriors, and well, it's not even that anecdotal. It's kind of known. The actor Tom Waits, not Tom Waits the musician. He's an actor. He's the guy who gets killed. He's the one warrior who gets killed in the movie. Wasn't supposed to happen, but they beefed on the set. I worked with Tom Waits on some stuff, and we talked about it, and he said Walter Hill's a piece of shit. He said he's like F that guy. He said nasty individual, don't like him, and I got fired because I told him so to his face. So that's really it. Couple of other things to kind of go through with the movie that I think is interesting. So it was initially also thought to be a Clint Eastwood, Richard Pryor project, which is fascinating, but telling when you're thinking about Cates as a character, the kind of Dirty Harry thing. There's a lot of reasons why Eastwood didn't do it, didn't happen. I've never gotten clarity if Pryor was actually ever attached. I don't think so. Though I do know in Pryor and Eddie's like later like beef that happened, sadly, the 48 hours thing came up between them, right? So there was that. Then when it got greenlit, Gregory Hines was the first choice to play Reggie Hammond. And Gregory couldn't do it. And I look forward to doing something with Gregory Hines in it. Because I just want to talk about the amazing person that Gregory Hines is, but also his interesting. Gregory Hines was in a really interesting position to become a mega actor. That never happened in the way that I think they wanted it to, which like.
Yeah, it was close. Running Scared.
It was close.
Like,
Running
it was
Scared, White
yeah.
Knights, which we have to do White Knights. Oh my gosh. Like we really have to talk about Imperial 80s, man. But like that's like, it's just an interesting story. And I wonder if Gregory's ever I'll have to look about it. I'm, so sad he died so young. And I met him once, such a lovely guy. Anyway, I don't want to go there too much. Interesting. So then what happened with Eddie was when Hines wasn't available, right? Walter Hill's, I believe, girlfriend or wife at the time was an SNL watcher. Said, "What about this guy?" And Hill was like, "Okay, yeah, let's check him out, right?" And and they went through like a bit of a process, and they were like, "Yeah, this guy's great," and it was a thing that kind of like launched him. People will say, "Well, let's see what happens with this guy." And Eddie has talked about it in interviews that like he said when he made the movie, like no one had so many people had no confidence that it was going to work. That like this Eddie thing was like nada, and like they've always been like surprised at like his stardom. He talks about it. So that, but an interesting thing with it is that if you look at the film with the credits, it has like 5 screenwriters. It's because they kept having to bring people in to add other things. So a guy that we've talked about named Stephen E.D. Souza, he was one of the writers for Running Man, or the writing for Running Man. He came in to make them feel more actiony, like real actiony, because they said Hill still had a kind of like slow moving action kind of quality to himself. So Souza was bringing the kind of more bombastic action. And then they brought in this other guy, what is his name? Gross, I believe is his name.
Larry Gross, yeah.
Larry Gross, to bring in more of the dialogue, right? The dialogue to kind of make the characters have more quip and vibe in the movie. So then I guess a lot of the shitty, horrible stuff that Nolte will say, and also on all the sex. Well, he was the one who developed the narrative that Eddie wants he wants to get laid. That's like one of his grand
trim, as Eddie says repeatedly.
When I always think of Dave Chappelle when I hear that, because he said it so much in this Chappelle show. I can't like shake that from me. The last person to kind of talk about, and there's like before we kind of go in the movie, we talk about other people, is Nolte. So Nolte's a weird one, man, and I don't know if you saw anything, because like it's really hard to track how Nolte's career got off. It's really hard. So he's from Nebraska, I believe. Isn't that where he's from? He's from Oklahoma, Nebraska. I can't remember.
Omaha, Nebraska. Yep.
Omaha, Nebraska, right? Was like a lettered football player in school, right? Things like that. Athlete. Then he got out of that, and he went into kind of acting for a while. He went to modeling. He was a model for a while, and he went to the Stella Adler School, one of the very famous um acting teachers along with like Strasberg and Adler, and studied under her, and then was doing like regional theater. But like when I look up his career, I probably will have to find some interviews with him. There's like this huge gap because like he does a couple of like uncredited roles, and then like he's quickly in like starring roles in movies. Like it's super quick how he
So
becomes like a movie star. Go ahead.
So I guess like what is said, and I'd have to go back and I don't think I ever watched this, but this show it was a TV miniseries, Rich Man Poor Man, is like
Okay.
sort of credited as it's about this family, the Jordache family from the period following World War II into the late 60s. And that was sort of credited as launching. It won a bunch of
Right.
Emmys and Nolte won Outstanding Lead Actor Emmy for it. So that probably really, became his launch pad or whatever.
Which is interesting for him to then go from that to a movie career in the 70s. It's like someone had an interest in making. I mean, I'm not saying I think Nick Nolte is an interesting actor to watch. In this movie, I can't really get with the character. There's some later movies. There's a movie, a Sidney Lumet movie called Q&A that he's great in. He plays a racist, like overt racist in the film, and he's really good in this movie. Like really convincing in that role. But he does a couple of like these like movies that are not very big. Like The Deep, Who'll Stop the Rain, which is him and Tuesday Weld, right? And like it kind of creeps up, and then but this is like his first like real big movie, and like it's given to him. It's like it's not a movie that like someone who um previous to that, like with those kind of credits, like would normally get. You know what I'm saying? Like even with a big TV thing, like they were like, we're gonna make Nick Nolte a movie star. And if you think about who he is, and we'll talk about it in the movie, his kind of essential qualities, right? Like the kind of qualities he gives off, this like large, um, burly, intense, but there's a way with almost all of his roles, they try to make his intensity a kind of pain, right? And they kind of utilize it like he cares so much that it like destroys him, kind of thing. With like it's like the Nolte thing, right? He has this like overabundance of care that's like kind of deformed him, right? As like a social being. Um, and he becomes so useful, I think, long, right? Um, and like his long kind of like journey as like a movie and the very various kind of roles he ends up doing throughout his career, because this really kind of, I think, like just kind of it kind of like just cements, not just for him, but I think for a lot of other people, right? um yeah, we can kind of stop there. Like I don't know if you have other things you want to bring in, because there's other people like James Remar, Sonny Latham, or like Landon in the movie, like, which is like another interesting thing we could talk about. We will talk about. But yeah, those are like initial kind of scopy things to kind of
Yeah.
bring in there.
I mean, the big thing for me watching this movie this time, right? I have a much more critical lens around propaganda and on propaganda, psychological operations, and things like that are going on. The timing of the movie, I think, is quite significant because the movie comes out in December of 1982. It comes out almost a year. I think I calculated it's 366 days. It's almost a year to the day from Mumia's arrest in 1981. And like I think about the kind of overall architecture of the film, right? It's it's a movie that where the character you're most inclined to sympathize with in the movie is a jailhouse snitch ultimately. That's what Eddie is he's he's not only ratting out one of his former, um, I wouldn't call comrades because he is totally criminal mentality in the film, and so it's like, fellow con men basically or
Mhm.
whatever. Um,
Thieves.
yeah, yeah, no honor among thieves, right? Yeah, that kind of idea, but it's also a film that promotes the certain narratives about cop killers in a very kind of funny way, actually. I mean, the scene that stuck out to me the most is there's a couple seasons. So there's a black police chief within the film again, which we've talked about, and his role within the film is so, I mean, like to your point of being kind of resistant to it. I mean, some of the stuff within the film is so bad that you're just like, seriously? Like, I'm supposed to believe that fucking line right now? Like, or I'm supposed to believe that that would happen in this scenario, right? Um, really poorly written at times from a believability standpoint in the film. But there's a moment where, fairly early on, and I know we'll go through the film, but I just want to highlight it to just make this point, um, where they're in the police station, and this is after a couple of Nick Nolte's character, Jack Cates is his name. A couple of the detectives that he's been with trying to get this guy Gantz, who's the central kind of villain of the film. I say that in quotes because, you know, you could argue Nolte's the villain in the film in a certain whatever, like, but intended to be the villain for sure is this guy Gans. Um, and he's blown away, a couple of detectives basically. And done a bunch of other crazy stuff. We'll go into all the things that he does to just make him absolutely deplorable, bottom of the barrel, like psychopath, is what they're trying to do here. But that has a specific purpose, right? So this has a specific purpose to sort of sear in everybody's minds that anyone who kills a cop has to be like just totally beyond a state where you can even think about reasonable motivations or retribution or strategy or anything else, right? Um, and the scene, the guy, so he's played by, let me pull him up. So yeah, he's played by Frank McRae, who's a black character actor folks would recognize from a number of movies over the years. The name of it's Hayden, I think is the way they pronounce it, or Haddon, I don't know, Hayden. But he's the chief. I don't even know if they say his name at any point in the movie actually, but he's just there to deliver a few lines within the film that are like a very heavy-handed in every instance, um, like piece of propaganda that they're trying to get across, always specifically from a black man's perspective, like intentionally, like, here you go, like this guy's gonna tell you this. He says, Jack, there's an official department policy about cop killings. Now, cop killers represent a special priority because any man crazy enough to kill a cop is a greater threat to an unarmed civilian, right? It's like, it's such a canned and like shitty line, but it's like, you know, if I had the soundboard, it's the message, right, of the film. And yeah, I mean, that's so when I was watching it and thinking about the timing of it, it's just a very interesting film that way because, and we'll get to its message about like racial inclusion and the kind of, awakening of Nick Nolte, also in contrast to Frank McRae's character as well at the end of the film and all of that. Um, which has its own nefarious propaganda narrative, motives as well. But I do think that, this is a genre, in addition to the buddy cop, thing, the idea, and there's also versions of this of that are actually the same in terms of this. I'm trying to think. There's one in the '90s, and I'm blanking on the name, but this idea of pairing a convict, right, with a cop, and they have to solve things together or figure out things together or whatever. Like, it's not the only movie that does that. Um, but anyway, the odd couple, you know, guy folks trying to figure it out and sort out their own, whatever in between. Um, wasn't there one with like Alec Baldwin and maybe they were both convicts in that one? Alec Baldwin and Samuel Jackson, I think, is the one I'm thinking of.
Oh, I
Um,
think, yeah, is that the one that's the kind of it's kind of a remake of it's kind of a Defiant Ones remake, I think, is what you're talking
yeah,
about. I mean, there's also like The Last Boy Scout
yeah,
with Bruce
yeah,
Willis. He's not a criminal. He's a I think he's an athlete, right, or something like that.
yeah, yeah.
Damon
He's a football
Wayans.
player, I think. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I hear you. But it's like it's a redemptive thing. It's like this
Totally.
person of in need of some kind of social redemption. So Eddie's character is because he's a criminal, um, the opportunity for social redemption, for really for rehabilitation, um,
Yeah.
comes through this conduit of Nick Nolte, who calls him Watermelon.
Yeah. Good lord. So, you can look at other films, right, that are like sort of a part of developing this kind of cop killer genre, right? And there's Dirty Harry, there's The Onion Field, there's actually a movie called Cop Killers, which is 73. There's a movie called Cop Killer or Corrupt, which is starring Harvey Keitel, which is actually an Italian film, comes out in 83. So after this, Maniac Cop, which is like kind of a horror, take on it in 88. But like what's really interesting to me is you have this movie come out in 82 and you have Badge of the Assassin come out in 85, right? Which we already went through with Doris on Me Burton. And in certain ways, by making by making Gans white within this film is also an important racial maneuver, I would say, right? Because it allows them to sort of say, it doesn't matter who the cop killer is, like, this is what they represent. And then but then at the time, the people who are most likely to be branded or discussed or demonized as cop killers are folks from the BLA, are people like Mumia, who's accused of this, right? Like, and on and on. And so, and then when you think about escapes, right, which is also, it's not, of course, well, there is an escape in it, which Gans represents, as well as, Billy Bear freeing him, right? The names, um, you know, uh, you know, what's the most prominent escape at this time? It's Asada Shakur, right? And so it's by sort of whitewashing or putting white face, although Billy Bear is obviously supposed to be, indigenous, which is a whole different thing to get into, and we will, because the film won't let us not. Um, that that you create this, like, okay, universally, people who escape from prison and then want to kill cops are these, like, just again beyond the pale, like lawless. There's no redeeming them. There's no trying to understand them. They are violent to a point of irrationality that is a threat to all of society. And it behooves, jailhouse informants and racist police to, unify, right, against this particular kind of threat. And then when you get to Badge of the Assassin, right, like, you've had work done to prepare you to, like, till you get to that point where the politics are made all silly and all of this. And really what it's all about is this, when they show that violence that goes on in the cop killing, and it's all cartoonish in Badge of the Assassin. There is work that's done prior to that to prime people that anyone who kills a cop is, this way. And then obviously that movie then hammers it home and deepens that narrative in a more directly anti-revolutionary sense, because this movie avoids talking about, politics at all other than the politics of kind of inclusion, right? Or integration. And so anyway, that's really all I had to say about it, but I thought that that was a really interesting within it, thinking about it coming out again, like, right, Mumia was sentenced 6 months prior to this movie coming out. He was captured a year before it came out. And so, like, I just can't help but think that this is on the mind of the people that are creating it, of like, okay, we need this project to move forward. And you could see it in that stupid line that Frank McRae delivers of like, we got to make sure to hammer this home somewhere. And oh, we need to have a black police chief to deliver this line.
Yeah, I mean, he has another line where later in the film that is woo, my goodness. Yeah, I think we can get right into the movie here because the film starts with Gans, um, and that is played by James Remar. And one of the interesting things about Gans that you'll discover is he's in this gang, but they're not a gang who seems to have a lot of any allegiance to each other, except for Gans and Billy Bear, which gives off the who is it? Zorro. Is it Zorro? Who's the Tonto? Is Tonto and who? In the is
He's Zorro's
Zorro?
sidekick.
It's
No,
is
the
it
Lone Ranger. The Lone
Lone
Ranger.
Ranger? There's a
Yeah.
Lone Ranger Tonto thing being used here.
Totally. Yeah, there's such a you can tell with Hill, and you see it in his other work, like he's constantly trying to revive the Western.
Yeah,
And I thought about that
100%.
a lot with Nolte's character, right? And we'll get into it, but like the idea of the cop that operates outside of the law, when you think about the cowboy, the idea is supposed to be that the law doesn't exist in this place, and so the cowboy instantiates the
Yeah.
law, right, through his own actions. And there's a lot of interesting, yeah, we can talk about that as we get into it, but yeah,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead,
mean, and
sorry.
in a way, just to kind of do that is that, like, I mean, saying it disgusts me, but Gans has a Tonto, so for Kate's to catch Gans, he needs one, and he goes to the prison to get a black one, and then there's a way because I have to skip around. Who kills Billy Bear? Hammond. I mean, it's like it's fucked. It's like their brains are so dirty, right? They're so very dirty. But the last point I want to make before we get right into the beginning of the film is that Gans is surrounded by colored folk. He does have Luther, which we'll get to, who's white, but there's Henry Wong, Reggie Hammond, and Billy Bear. And to your point, I think this could also go into the larger imagination of also the white left, right? The Weathers, all of these white people who are connected to the national liberation movements of people of color, right? And the popular imaginary that was constructed by mass media to show these people as just absolutely batshit crazy, hysteric murderers and killers, right? So yeah, I think it's them tapping into that imaginary and understanding to like complete that imaginary because to have a white person, they still need to kind of have like them. They live in the outskirts, and what are the outskirts? Non-white people, right? Um, so it's really and then it's funny when you see gangs. So the film starts off with a chain gang, right? And you get the music, you get the like the real, it's like brr, brr, like the music is like it's so syrupy. It has so much like weight and heavy, lots of atmosphere. I believe it's like a saxophone, like like it's totally right. You're just hearing it, right? And It also has a really like provocative shooting style. Lots of like long lenses. So telephoto, so like longer lenses that you can get a lot more depth. But then also, except for the beginning, which I think is interesting because it's a chain gang, so they're trapped, but there's freedom. A lot of the film is like done in like confines. So like they'll create like lots of lines for like walls or like literally shoot it within walls. Things are always protruding into the frame to make you feel like you can't escape. That like you live in this claustrophobic thing, which is also I think something about San Francisco too. The kind of the way San Francisco is constructed, it's very long streets because of the hills you can see down. So they want to get like the length of the city. But in this chain gang part, you see the men, they're working, doing the thing. The music is coming, right? You got like the corrections guys with the guns, right? And you see this car is moving and it's like it's coming in, it's like really really like crazy, and like this is like they immediately kind of put you into the emotions of it. And out the car you see Billy Bear come out, or Billy, I'm just gonna say Billy, right? So Billy comes out the car, and you then see Gans, and you don't know their names yet. I don't think you actually hear their names yet, right? And Gans comes out, and he is one of the people in prison doing the work in the middle of the field or the road, right? And immediately racial epithets are like thrown out. Like I think like the second line of the movie, right? There's a racialized epithet towards Billy. You got it.
Well, I'm looking at the script right now,
Is it in there?
and it says it's the first line. It says, "Wonder what reservation they let him
No,
off
it
of."
might. I think it actually is the first line. No, I'm probably trying to like down it a little bit. And I'm just like, damn, they starting in hot, right? And but I think this is how they want you to associate with the characters, right? So he comes in and he's basically saying like his car is overheating. This is Billy when he gets out the truck, and he needs some water. So Gan starts to banter with him, right? And it's a racialized banter as well. And the funny thing is, even though the corrections officer knows he needs to keep Gans, he kind of enjoys the racialized banter going at Billy. Says a little bit himself. So it's kind of why he allows it, right? That like this casual, I can share this kind of casual racism towards an indigenous person with the criminal I'm supposed to be hanging out with. It then devolves, and then they attack each other, and I'm meaning Gans and Billy, and they're like in the mud, and they're like you're hitting a convict, boom boom boom, and then the guns come out, right? And you quickly discover that these two are basically in cahoots. They've set this all up to kind of get Gans to escape, right? They murder the cops, the corrections people, and the people disperse. So you're like thrust right into like the violence, and the violence in the film has a real punch. Like they're really into like when you see, because like if you think about the film, for the most part, other than when Gans and whatchamacallit die, and other than the criminals, you see a lot of cops get killed, and they make it like really excessive and brutal, right? Like you really see like them like just get like just like you see the guns like bah! Like the sound is super large. So they're immediately trying to put you into the emotion of like danger. And there's a line later by that, I think it's the one that you said, by the police chief, that like, people who kill cops are like a next level, right? So they want you to know like, oh man, this is like the fucking lowest of the low. Right? And like, yeah, like your heart is kind of like palpitating a little bit, like you're intrigued, you're like, oh shit. But also like you're immediately thrust into a very racialized, hardcore world.
I mean, there's a few fascinating things, and I was just trying to like look back at the scene real quickly to because like on one level, my mind is going like, well, where the fuck are these guys supposed to be on a chain gang? Because it's the movie is set in California, and California has not had chain gangs since the 1950s. And I mean, you could say, okay, well, maybe they're federal, but there's never any discussion because when they go to get, Eddie Murphy's character, right? They go to a state prison that's right nearby. Like, I mean, Nolte just drives over and gets him, you know, and there's no reason why they would necessarily like they most likely based on whatever they did, they would be in state facilities. And even if they're in federal facility, I mean, federal facilities, I don't think have chain gangs since for a very long time anyway. So chain gangs as they exist, to the extent that they exist, are usually in the South. Like, and they're building the fucking railroad on this chain gang also, which I'm like, who's still building a railroad in 1982? Um, But beyond that too, the funny thing I saw looking at the chain gang is like almost all of the prisoners are white that are on the chain gang too. But yet you still have that image, which people very much attach to like prisons like Angola, in Louisiana in our imagination and so on. Not, I mean, it's literal that this still exists, of course, but in the kind of popular thinking around prisons. Where you see the guards with the big shotgun, like in the they've got like Mountie hats, that are out there with the big, aviator sunglasses, that, mirror shades that you can't see through, that kind of thing. Um, so it is a very interesting scene. Yeah, and you have Billy Bear, which in the script they're like a large Blackfoot Indian named Billy Bear, um, rolls up in this like old truck, right? And there's a whole bunch of racist stuff said in part by Gans, which I think, I mean, some of that you're supposed to read as he's playing along, right? Because this guy Billy Bear is really coming to free him, so he gets into a fight with Billy Bear in order for Billy Bear basically to hand them both guns so that then they can cap all of the cops. Um, I also think there's another thing in this film that bothers me from a a criminal perspective, which is like that they always leave eyewitness police to their like cop killings. So it's like they always leave somebody to like radio to let folks know like exactly what has happened and who did it, right? And so yeah, I mean, and that happens multiple times in the film where they have the opportunity to kill. They've already killed multiple police, and they have the opportunity to take care of the last one who's an eyewitness to it, and they let him go. Um, so that also, I think, just anyways, I mean, it's just a plot device within the film, but you know, anyway.
You got to keep that script moving, man. You got to find a way to keep the script moving. I'm like, Gans is like the most crazy person they've ever put in a movie. You don't think this dude is gonna figure out, oh, let me go kill this dude in the truck before I get out of here? Like, it won't take that much extra time.
Exactly. I mean, it's the thing. It's like they're trying to make him Javier Bardem in like old No Country for Old Men, but like not fucking smart enough to to actually do the things that Javier is willing to do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the film then transitions to San Francisco, right? Where it's like pretty much where the rest of the film like just takes place. And you then get to essentially begin to kind of understand Kate's life. So they do the very typical thing of he's with his girlfriend, played by a very young Annette O'Toole. This is like very, very young in her career, right? Um, and like I also another thing about this movie absolutely hates women. It absolutely hates women. It has such a, which is not like,
Yeah, there's no redemptive politics whatsoever. Not even like an attempt to find like a liberal.
no, because
There's nothing.
even where his girlfriend Elaine, um she's disappointed in her relationship with Kate's and like where it's going and like the kind of like love. It's it's pit against his very real world pressures. And I put those in quotations, right? The kind of real world pressures that are manifested within the film. And it becomes this like long arc that she's just not understanding, which becomes a significant trope of women attached to men in these kind of situations, all the way up to like, I remember if you were a Breaking Bad watcher, the critiques of Skylar.
Breaking
That
Bad makes an appearance in this movie too.
Jonathan Banks, one of his two
Yeah.
early appearances with Eddie. This is a lesser role, but very important role. This one. Um. So he's with his girl, like they're like in bed together. He has no affection. She's like looking for affection. He forbids it. He kind of has this line of where always kind of like, I got too much to do. Like there's like a sequence where he like pours, alcohol into his coffee cup to kind of denote that he has this, he's just like under a lot, right? And he needs that extra edge. And she kind of like calls him out, but they don't even make it what she does it tender. They just make her a complainer, right? Like she's just such a complainer that like, yeah, like reasonable people will be like, well, I get why she's complaining. But the way they kind of create it is you're not really supposed to have full on empathy. You're supposed to like go, well, she has a point, but she can maybe be a bit more understanding of his pressures, right? And he wants to keep this kind of distance with her, right? And even if you see the shots, not a lot of two shots of them. The only two shot that actually exists of them is him walking away from her, and she's like behind him. It's really interesting. A lot of like shot reverse, so they're kind of keeping them separate. And this is how you're introduced to Kate's in this social thing. He works really hard. He doesn't live with his girlfriend. She has makes his line about like, you know that he's not. I don't actually think we ever actually see his apartment in the movie. I don't think we actually do. That you're at her place, because I think you only essentially after that see him in his car or at the
I
police
think you're
station.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of get that in the beginning. And then they immediately, because this movie also like it's actually not that long, it's like 90 minutes. Immediately juxtaposes to Billy and Gans beginning their kind of quest in San Francisco, right? Where you see Billy sitting next to a dead body with a gunshot wound in his head on a bench, right? And Gans on the phone looking to score women, right? For and then also, yeah, my there's also that always that part where he's like, what where Billy comes in and like, what about me? Meaning like, Gans is up here trying to get him a woman. And like he's like, what about me? Yeah. And but Billy could only have an Indian, which I also found really, yeah, make sure she's an Indian, right? And they use that. They say Indian heavy in the movie. That's why I'm saying that here, like it can only be that, which I found really interesting. That like Billy works with a white guy, but he has these is it that Billy has these very strict codes of sexual events in his life. He can only he's pure. He has a pure kind of racialization when it comes to that, but not in his criminal dealings.
Yeah, I was trying to find the line. It was something about there's a whole they say he makes it not a turban, and I'm trying to remember what he said because it's like trying to,
Yeah, because he says
like
Indian, and they think that you don't hear the other line.
Right.
right?
Right.
So he says, no, not with a turban. It is something else. I can't remember what it is, but the whole thing that, like,
Oh, I know what it is.
say it.
It's a race. He says, I'm not going to say it. It's a racist epithet for Indian woman that starts with SQ that people probably would know. But
That's
yeah,
right. You're
that's
right.
what it is.
Yeah, that's why we see we that stuff tries to not enter our brains. So that's what I'm saying. Like it's just like the racism in this movie is so constant. And then you also then have it like juxtaposed previously with this like really like with your lead character. The first time you meet him, he has this really antagonistic relationship with the woman he's supposed to be intimate with, right? So then you go to the next scene, you have the two criminals um having this like, really like this nasty conversation about scoring women, right? And then you use racial epithets to describe the racialized women. I mean, it's like this is the first. I'm looking at it right now. This is the first like 7 minutes of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of things. So, I mean, some of this is very classic propaganda shit. Like you know, Nolte, again, is this sort of cowboy thing. Like he's he's in the department, but he's isolated. Nobody likes him because he doesn't really follow procedure and all of this kind of stuff. His girlfriend doesn't really understand. He's pouring bourbon or some liquor into his coffee at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and she's like, that's a hell of a way to start your day. Or what she says, uh, let's see. She says, "That's a fairly crummy way to start a morning." And he said, "Maybe I got a fairly crummy day ahead." And it's just a classic, like, you don't know what it's like to be a cop. And what's interesting about their relationship, actually, based on that first scene, rewatching it, because I didn't really remember their relationship was not memorable to me as a kid. I didn't even remember it. Like, um, was that I assumed that this is like his side piece, basically that like he has either a family, right? Or that she's just a girl that he, just sleeps with occasionally, right? But she's not really a love interest based on the way that it kind of starts out. And then you realize fairly quickly that like, oh no, he actually does really have affection for her. He's just a piece of shit, basically. But but you know, it's interesting that way that this is always the thing with cops in movies, is this idea that the women that they love don't really understand, don't understand them, don't understand what they have to go through, right? And they have to, it's like of course he has to drink alcohol in order to wake up in the morning, and that should be what he's doing, kind of thing, is sort of what, because Nolte in the film is, there's certain ways where Eddie, of course, points out, or Reggie Hammond points out that, he's a dumbass and all of this, but he is seen throughout the whole film as an effective police officer, basically. And ultimately we get to like, what does he have to do to be effective enough to get to the cop killer, right? Which is a big part of what this is all leading up to. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's quite tired, I guess, on a lot of levels now. But it's just fascinating to me that that particular kind of archetype of the sexual love relationship of the police officer, it just kind of always has to be that way in movies.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to that thing of because of his job, he has developed faults, but his what he's kind of like developed has become unique, like a unique special set of skills, right? If you want to use that kind of like Liam Neeson thinking. And because of that, he is the only one, because he's been elevated in a certain kind of way, who can take this on. And when we get to the pretty much the scene that's going to come up in a few with the cops getting killed, by Gans and Billy, um, you realize that he is the only one and he becomes necessary. So his faults are actually necessary. So we have to accept them. Yeah, Year of the Dragon. I mean, it just becomes, I think, an embedded. No, I don't think. I know it becomes an embedded script device because a lot of times when you have like screenwriting classes, they'll do this thing. They'll say, "Well, what's the complication for the character?" Right? So you'll have I have a cop, right? Or I have a thing, or what's a complication? So you then give them like a pathology of some sort. They drink too much, they're socially awkward, they have drugs, right? Um, or they do something. I always think of this movie, this really fucked up movie with Ray Liotta called Narc and Jason Patrick. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie. One of the most fucked up endings in the history of all movies because they justify a cop framing two innocent people because another cop gets on drugs and basically kills himself, so he basically can't get his pension. So there's like an emotional justification for Ray Liotta, who's also known in the film to just be a shitty cop who's abusive. Like it's the thing that's known. Even the abusive cops say he's too much. Right? No, well, that guy takes the abuse too far, right? But like it's like part of the long imaginary, right? And so when you get to Kate's, right, and he gets because yeah, well, you don't get to the next scene because the next sequence also just shows why he's necessary because then you get into Gans, right, and Luther. And yeah, so the movie, like I said, it does like these like telephoto shots, and you see basically because it doesn't. It also introduces you because like they want you to be like a detective movie where you got to figure out the stuff, not like when it is. So you see like this like long telephoto shot, and you get like Luther and this. You don't even know he's Luther, this young guy and a woman. He's also super aggressive. Like I always find it funny, like the girlfriends of these guys, like they have no agency. They just get flailed around. I mean, like poor Luther's girlfriend in the movie, she just gets flailed for 90 minutes, right? Like she has nothing other than being damseled. It's so fucking sexist. It's terrible, right? And so she's, they're moving around, and then they get into a car and they're about to go. He's like talking down to her, being very, very aggressive and mean. It's almost like a really bad dad, right? To like his little kid. I mean, that's how demeaning it is. To go into the car, and then you see there is Gans and Billy waiting for them, right? And the whole thing is Luther, of course, is surprised to see them. And not to go too intricately into it, but the whole big thing is Luther has some money, right? Gans wants it. And but Luther's like, I can't get it for a couple of days. So basically, like, we're gonna hold on to your girlfriend until those couple of days are over, and you're gonna give us the money. And the way they play this scene with Gans is he's so like because James Remar, I have to say, he's not very good in the movie. He's actually really bad in the movie, and it's weird. I remember James Remar being better in other things, but I don't know. He's really not good because he plays like I'm psycho, and that's kind of how the movie like wants you to because they have no real backstory. Like the farthest the backstory that comes is when Reggie reveals how they got the money. There is no real backstory, and this is another thing in screenwriting that they make a providence. This idea that you shouldn't write those type of things and don't have certain types of like social commentary of how they got there. Just kind of make them, and they become like innate. So when you experience Gans, you basically just see someone who's naturally fucking crazy, wicked, and scary. And the way they shoot him, and I mean with the frame, him and Billy and the woman in the back, she's like, ah! I mean, you're just like, right? So you juxtapose that with like Kate, who's tough, and because they're gonna have a convergence. It's like you're your perception of like the future, you know that's what's eventually going to happen, right? So you're like, oh shit, wow, you're getting a little nervous about this entire affair, you know. But as we'll see, his Kate's necessary, faults is the only thing that can match with like this insanity of these two people.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's the point within all, propaganda and just bourgeois, ideology in general is always to sort of abstract these characters from, history or social relationships or anything and just be like, here is this evil thing that has to be stopped. I mean, Gans is supposed to be more of like a force of nature or something like that than he is supposed to be an actual human being. And
Yeah,
that's it's quite it's funny when I found it funny when you're talking about screen writing school. I mean, I think that's something I don't know, maybe a side thing to delve into at some point. I know you do like a lot of work around this kind of stuff through your Patreon and other stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, it's so bad. Like it's such bad literature, like writing, um this idea that like, oh, you add these little complications into a figure and like then that is it's like, ooh, and that's kind of the weird thing too about Nolte. Like you're sort of like, well, why does this girl want him to call her after this morning? You know what I mean? Like you're like, why is she trying to get this relate, like he's a piece of shit, like she should be absolutely like looking somewhere else, you know what I mean? But it's like, ooh, he's mysterious, he's dark and brooding, like he drinks bourbon at 6 o'clock in the morning with his coffee.
yeah. She senses
Um,
the real thing in him that none of us
yeah,
can see in the movie.
that's it. That's it. Yeah. But I agree with you also on on James Remar's acting in it. But I also just, looking through the script, I just don't think there's even much for him to work with really. Like it's like how could he, it's a difficult role to act well of just like, hey, you're supposed to be a sociopath and we're not going to give you any story basically of how to
Yeah.
work this,
Yeah, it doesn't
so
really make any sense. His character doesn't really make any sense. It's like it becomes just like, okay, yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm sure James Rebar was like, just act crazy, I guess.
yeah,
With a
I'm
gun.
sure that's what
Have a
they told him. It's just like um yeah, and so that you go from this into, eventually them going to, it's like a weird scene because Nolte like pulls up behind a couple of
Yeah, it doesn't really make
detectives.
he says he hears it on the radio, but it's not
Yeah.
really clear. I imagine something was cut, probably. It's
Yeah,
weird.
I bet because there's a lot of scenes within the script that are not in the movie. But yeah, so Nolte's character, Jack Cates, he shows up, couple of detectives, one of them played by what's the name of the actor from Breaking Bad and
Jonathan Banks.
Jonathan Banks, right? It's funny
Young
because when I
Jonathan Banks.
saw him, I was like, I recognize this guy, but I can't place it from where. And then I look him up and I'm like, oh my God.
That was my experience when I watched Breaking Bad, because I was a Breaking Bad watcher, and
It's
I said,
Mike from Breaking
"Yeah,
Bad.
Mike," and I'm like, when I watched it, I was like, "Who is this guy? I know this guy," and then I think it was someone like my mom or my dad. It was like, "He's the guy from Beverly Hills Cop." Oh
Yeah.
shit! Because as an older man compared to when he's younger, he looks different. He
Yeah.
just looks
Yeah, I mean, his
different.
face from, like, here looks the same, but, of course, he's, like, bald now and all of this, and, anyway, he's one of the cops. There's another actor that plays the other cop, I can't remember his name, but he's also been in a bunch of different stuff, but they're, basically essentially, like, get lost, like, I don't remember the exact lines, but they deliver or note that Jack Cates is kind of persona non grata within the department. Like they don't really like him. He doesn't follow procedure well enough. He's a hothead. Like this is kind of what they're trying to to say about him, right? And he manages to convince them that he can go along. You know, they're looking for a guy who has stolen credit cards, is basically, so they don't know that it's Gans that they're about to, run into. And so they go in and they're like, you can stake out the lobby. So they leave. Kate's in the lobby. They do a bunch of really shitty, again, like the treatment of women, right? There's a woman behind the
So the
counter at the
clerk, so
hotel.
the hotel clerk is
Y-
so bad.
Yeah. They I probably have it in my notes, but they say actually demeaning shit to her as they're like getting the um getting, let's see. Yeah, I just said
Well, as
they're
we look
very
for,
awful to
like,
her.
I mean, and then like Nolte to get because basically they want to know who's upstairs, so they have the ledger, and then like so like the not the Jonathan Banks guy, the other guy. The way he's talking, he's like giving her like the sweetheart, and but like sweetheart, not in like hey sweetheart, like sweetheart, like basically not everything of out of sort of calling her the B word, like really this nasty attitude towards her. And then, but she's like, look, I'm doing my job, and like y'all come in here and harass me, like stop, right? And then Nolte, Case just like barrels in, and remember, like Nick Nolte's a big dude, and they have it like in like a wide shot. So he just kind of imposes into the frame and it's like pushes her out the way to get the ledger. And I'm like, damn. And it's
So
like
this is,
it's go ahead.
I got the little bit of script. So her name in the script is Frizzy. Um, they flash their badges. She says, "Oh, guys, you were in last week. You better ask around. I'm not supposed to be hassled. I got friends." And then Van Sant, which is the cop, I think that you're talking about, he says, "Hey, park the tongue for a second, sweet pants. We just want to search a room." And then she says, "Not unless you got a warrant." And then in the script, at least, Kate says, "Maybe you should have been a lawyer instead of a dumb skirt working behind a register." I don't think they had Kate's deliver that line in the
I
movie,
think he
but it
cuts that
doesn't,
line. But sweet
no,
pants, I remember.
and I think they do say dumb skirt actually to her, and so it's like, it's so, and then they just take the register from her and just read it and find out where he is, right? Which is like, on one level, it's like, okay, yeah, like this is how cops behave, but it is, yeah, I don't know. It's just funny that, not funny, but there are no redeeming interactions with women within this film at all. There's not one.
There's like one cop later who gives him information, but she works within it. But she's not given a character. She's essentially a plot device, right? And she just happens to be a woman in the movie. But yeah, no, like the it goes back to your main point that you made earlier, that this kind of activity, because then if you have this sequence, right? And then in isolation, you can just look at it as cops are shitheads. But then you isolate it next to what's gonna happen. Not isolate, you connect it to what's gonna happen later with their killing by Gans. And then even what's also later, that they were basically somewhat insufficient, not because they were mean to this woman or some forth, because they're like ill prepared with what Kate has, the essential qualities that Kate has, that they're basically not good enough cops. And it's not because of their treatment of a woman hotel clerk, right? Or anything like that. It's because they're basically not aggressive. Actually, they're not aggressive enough,
Yeah.
right? And that justifies all the excessive force that we see cops, right? I mean, what like we've talked about with Baptist the Assassin and other things in Lethal Weapon. It's like it becomes the narrative of, well, look, man, I get it. It's a bit excessive, but it's a rough world out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the debate in the film between the 38 special versus the 44 Magnum, right? And the idea that now that bad guys have the 44, like the cops are like so outgunned, sort of idea, right? Which is like, it's so funny to think back about that, because it's like really, we're talking about, I mean, it is wild on some level that you did have cops that would rock around with like a 6 shooter, like when we think about how much military shit they have
Yeah.
nowadays. But this is actually like one of the things that they work in, which then when we get to like Lethal Weapon later on, this is also remarked on, and everybody's like, yeah, you got to have, like, it's an interesting thing. Joel Silver always made sure to promote like okay, we need bigger guns for these cops. Like they're
From
outgunned.
the Magnum to the Beretta, right? You know,
Yeah,
he
exactly.
goes to each like qualitative shift of weaponry.
Yeah.
This
Can't
might
be
go
going
to
around with these 38 specials anymore. But they go up. It's so, and then they knock on the door again. Like they don't know, of course, that it's, the cop killer, right? So this is, kind of stupid thing, but they knock on the door again, like to demonize both Gans and Billy Bear in this. Gans like puts the gun to, they have prostitutes, right? We talked about the, sex workers. We talked about that from, them ordering them and getting the Indian one for Billy Bear and all of this. So Gans, puts a gun to the head and makes the sex worker that he's with, you know, answer the door and say, "Oh, just a minute. I need to get dressed." This kind of thing. And I guess they had a double room, so they sneak around. Gans just pistol whips one of them for like no reason whatsoever, right? Just to do it and mess her face up. And then Billy Bear like tosses one of them, and she's like holding her neck as if he was like choking her or something like that. And then they grab, which I had
Luther's
forgotten who
girlfriend.
this was, but they grab Luther's girlfriend and take her with because she's their hostage. They can't lose her because she's their leverage over Luther. And they sneak out the second door, right? Because it's like supposed to be adjacent rooms, I guess, that they have. And so they sneak out Billy Bear's room and they come out in the lobby and they just ambush the cops, right? And so that's it. That, of course, then Cates hears it. He's all the way down in the lobby. He's, springs into action, runs upstairs.
Calls for help now. You get your famous Nick Nolte yells, like him and
Yeah.
I wanted. They should do a omnibus of shots of him and Al Pacino yelling.
Oh man. So yeah, he runs up. He's too late. Then he comes down, and then he gets into what is important in the film, even though it's just a stupid little thing. But like, he gets into the first kind of, you know, negotiation slash shootout with Gans, which Gans always holds a hostage when he's confronted with a cop, right? And he's holding a gun to Luther's girlfriend's, to her head, and is, threatening that he's going to shoot her if he doesn't hand over the gun. And he's going to shoot, actually no, he's going to shoot the cop, right? That's the thing that he ends up, because uh Mike Ehrentrout, um he comes down the stairs, right? And he's been shot, but he's not dead yet. And again, Gans is always leaving people, like, but Gans is like, "I'll shoot him if you don't hand your guns over." And so, Cates agrees to hand them over, basically. And then he uses Kate's gun to shoot Mike Ehrentrout. And so I just say, like, this is a minor point. They make a little bit of a deal out of this. I think this, maybe it wouldn't be a bigger deal. It's a bigger deal in other movies. Like the idea that Cates's gun is taken from him and used to kill a cop, right? Like, you would think he would be immediately suspended without pay or something like this, right? Because it's like, how do they even know that he didn't kill the cop if it's his, like, it's just a very kind of, I don't know. I found that weak within the plot, at least based upon, subsequent generations of propaganda in which there would be more theater around some kind of internal investigation in this instance. Because yeah, he literally loses his gun, doesn't have it because Cates keeps it, and it's used to murder, his fellow officer or whatever. But anyways, this is the the lesson. This is kind of the close in certain way of act 1 of the film, right? Of like, okay, like Gans is willing to do anything and he'll double cross you and he'll say he's going to do this and he'll still kill, your buddy, even if he said he was going to let him go, like all of that, like all bets are off with this guy. He has no principles, no morals, right? He just wants to kill basically. And, so then, Nolte goes back to the police station basically, and that you get the sort of start of the next act of the film basically.
Yeah, I mean, on the point of like losing the gun, there's like it's a trope thing, and it's such a like the castration of the cop when he loses his gun to someone else, right? It's such a it's very 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 because like it becomes the to retrieve his manhood, which is through his cop, which is through his realization as a cop. He has to retrieve the gun because and like the whole phallic of the gun. It's like it's just so psychologically weird and twisted. And when you do that under the kind of guise of all the racialization, the kind of hatred of women in the movie, it just turns up the maleness of the movie. Like you're watching it and you're like, I'm watching like the most hyper male affair there is, right? Because you like the next scene, they go in back to the precinct and like the other cops are discussing it with Kate's, right? And there's like a lot of arguing over like whose fault it is, right? And Kate's is in the position that these guys made a mistake. Basically, like they were careless. They didn't take into account that these people might be super violent. They just weren't ready. They're like, nah, Kate's, there's something about you because when you're there, this shit happens. And the fact that you lost your gun and he has your gun proves your insufficient policing, right? Which then they almost get into a fight in the middle of the precinct, right? And also like notes on the police precincts, like 80s police precincts are if you look at them are always, they always have a bunch of stuff, right? Sex workers, just being thrown around, weird looking criminals with like their shirts off and shit, and pictures of people who are dead everywhere. And then always a police chief comes in yelling, you. I don't remember. You remember the movie So I Married an Axe Murderer?
Yeah.
Right? And like the funny joke with Alan Arkin because he was the opposite, right? He was always very nice. And the guy and Anthony LaPaglia is like, I need you to yell at me, man. So basically the whole movie is him practicing how to be the shitty like police chief. And he's like, did I do okay? And it's actually really, really funny Alan Arkin doing that shit. But that's like it's what it is, because every single movie, the chief comes in and has to just yell at the top of his lungs. What the fuck are you doing? You're too much, Jack. This is your last thing. But when they meet, like you pointed out, he lets him go on his own because we need to nail these people. He lets him work alone too, which I also find interesting, right? And yeah, yeah,
It's so
really blew
much.
up.
I mean, actually, it's a scene that's like 4 minutes long, probably, and
Mm-hmm.
does a whole lot of really weird stuff within it. I mean, one, you get
Oh
the
yeah.
like the discussion of yeah, a whole lot of people getting shot by 44s lately, heavy artillery, like so. This discussion, this panic around like you know criminals having bigger guns, right? Which obviously is an ongoing theme that still always justifies more militarization. Um, then it's one of the sex workers. She says, Gans is going to give you guys a hard time. And they're like, oh, yeah, why? And she says he likes shooting cops a whole lot more than he likes getting laid. Right. And so this was her line to deliver. Then there's this hilarious aspect of this scene where in like 2 minutes, they connect every dot that's necessary to like figure out to basically do the whole police investigation happens within like 90 seconds, right? Where they're like pulling out files, right? And they're like, oh, he's incarcerated with this person, this person, this person. Oh, the guy whose credit cards they stole is this. Um, and it's just kind of funny because it's like, I mean, police, even with all of the surveillance that they have now, are not this quick to be able to like connect all of these dots and stuff like that. The notion that on like paper police files that they're able to figure out like whose place to go into, and to figure out that they need to go get Reggie Hammond from prison to help them because he must know how to find Gans, right? And so it's like it's so quick. And so you literally move within like 5 minutes of the film from these cops getting wasted by Gans to like they're now in in the prison, like talking to Reggie Hammond, Eddie Murphy's character. And this is also the scene, I just should say, where that quote that I read earlier, Jack, there's an official department policy about cop killings. Now cop killers represent a special priority because any man crazy enough to kill a cop is a greater threat to an unarmed civilian, end quote. So that line is delivered here by the black police chief. And so that also, as I said before, I think is, maybe the most important political message that this film is trying to deliver among several. Like you could debate it, but again, thinking about it like a year after Mumia gets captured and all of that. But yeah.
No, 100%. I do agree. I think it is. If it's not tapping into a kind of thing that they've already mandated, it's like trying to help set the mandate, right? Or doing both. And yeah, you get this like shot of the bridge, and then next thing you know, you're in the prison, right? And one of the very
One
first things that go ahead.
one more thing I forgot to, I think we kind of said this, but yeah, the police chief also is like, so he's pissed at Nick Nolte for like losing his gun and all of this, but he also gives him this license of basically like, you've got this timetable basically to do whatever the fuck it takes to get these guys. And I also found this fascinating too, because the notion that they would just send him in solo, basically, which is the idea after his gun has just been stolen and a cop was killed with it. But it's, within it's, you could justify it within the world of the script because they're saying, like, we know you who drink on the job and don't pay any attention to department policy. You're actually the one who can go get this guy. So anyway.
It's such a I really think American people really need to interrogate that concept like in a real way and how much it shows up in so much of our lives, right? This concept that you need a kind of rabid dog, but because that they're white, they're not it's like it's almost like a weird like crossbreed thesis, right? Like he has because I think also like the fact that Nolte's blonde also really is a big thing here. Um and because even where Gans is white, he's dark haired, and there's a way that they make Gans. Well, it's funny because in the sequel, his brother seems more ethnic. The one who plays his brother, there's almost a kind of idea that they feel like Latin. I found in the sequel, but I don't want to really go there. But this kind of like dark haired, like he's if you want to kind of get into like a Cedric Robinson, like he's like a lower level of a lower stock of Europeanness, right? Like we talked about in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles a bit,
Yeah.
right? And
It's also kind of
Nolte
the
is from that good stock, but he's because of his experience, he's developed it. But because he has inherently that good stock, he's always going to have a moral kind of center.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, similar in Year of the Dragon too, with like how they
Yeah.
they treat, Mickey Rourke as the Polish cop. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So like I always wonder, like, what does that play on the imaginary if they look at Gans? Would someone in their kind of imaginary would consider Gans to be he'd be, some, you know, part of Europe. Like I always think about this when my mother was young, living in the Lower East Side, she always talked about she was around a lot of Polish people, and she said she was really good friends with a lot of the Polish people, and she would also witness the kind of more cosmopolitan whites and how racist and how ethnically, xenophobic they were towards like the Polish and the things that they would say to them about them and like the names that they would use. And she said she was very aware of it, you know. And but yeah, so you get into this sequence where like Nolte goes into the prison, and essentially what he does is he forges a document that will let him have Reggie Hammond for 48 hours. Now, before that happens, he goes in and to have audience with him, and he's like, "You can go in." The guy asks him, and it says like, "You want some help?" And he's like, "No, I'm good." And then as he goes into the prison, you just begin to hear Eddie. Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. And what's funny about it is like you do feel the qualitative shift of the movie, right? Like it just and it's weird. It's like this is Eddie Murphy's first time in the movie, and he's like this murmur echoing from the sides of the walls, right? And you're just hearing this like high pitched voice, and it's like, what the fuck is that, right? Like, and it scrolls all the way down, and you see all the insides of the prisons. I think one of them has a Confederate flag. I could be wrong. As it scrolls down, and you go in, and Eddie is in a lazy boy, which I also just found hilarious that he's in a fucking lazy boy, laid out, shades on, hat, prison outfit, and some headphones, listening to the police. Right? The police of all, and it is like it's a famous like movie intro of a new like Hollywood phenomena, right? And they have this interaction, and it's the same thing. It's like Kate's doesn't even like, and this kind of starts the long thing in the movie. Kate's first interaction isn't like, "Hey, can you turn off your stuff?" It's like to grab the shit off of him and just like harass him out of his like enjoyable moment. Like his first introduction to Reggie is to be brutal, right? And they set the standard like immediately.
Yeah, it's fascinating even looking at how this is written in the script. So Kate's, he walks down the cell block. Inmates stare at him from inside the Stark cells. They don't know who he is, but they can smell a cop. Kate stops at 22, looks inside, a bit startled. Obviously, Reggie Hammond has connections and taste. The paint is fresh. There's frame prints on the wall instead of pinups, and the overall feeling is that of a graduate school dorm rather than a prison. Kate turns, nods to the guard at the end of the cell
Mm.
block. He throws a switch and the door opens. Hammond's cell. Kate steps inside. Hammond is at a table wearing a Sony Walkman and writing in some detailed ledgers with a fountain pen. He's boogieing in his seat to the music. Sprawled on a bunk nearby is Leroy, another black inmate close to Hammond's age. Leroy is leafing through a copy of Skin magazine. He doesn't even look at Kate's. So, I mean, very different. I mean, this is the thing too. I mean, like there's elements of that in the scene, but I think that, like you said, this movie is probably terrible and not memorable at all if Eddie Murphy is not in it and doesn't bring what Eddie Murphy brings to the film. Like, I don't know. Richard Pryor, he definitely would have brought some stuff and probably, could have done, a version of this. Gregory Hines, I can't see it at all. But yeah, it's just interesting in that respect because yeah, I mean that is him singing Roxanne is one of the most memorable, scenes of the whole film. Um and yeah, and then what Cates does is because he can't hear him or he doesn't respond, he grabs his Walkman and he pushes the override button and screams into it and like basically blows out, Reggie Hammond's ears. And so yeah, again, the brutalness and all of that, but that it is interesting. And also the idea that they thought a grad school dorm was the vibe that it's not the vibe that lands in the movie, but it's like it's also interesting that the script writers would want that to be what they thought of, even from I can't even really think of the idea that they're trying to plant other than that Hammond he wears the suits and everything else. Like he's supposed to be, have this sense of fashion and sophistication and all of this and is a con man, right? Like not he's supposed to be an intelligent criminal kind of thing with taste, I guess is the point.
Yes, because so the film, and I kind of want to like do like an overall arc to think about with this, because when you get Reggie, right, and they have their initial conversation, he has like demands, but you're immediately kept away from them. And this is the weird thing about identifying and why the identification with like Reggie always is a bit off, because Kate's is the central character. He drives everything. He can't drive things without Reggie. So Reggie becomes like the secondary supplement that he needs. But with secondary supplements and like these types of things, they always hold information that you're kept from. So even if you are like, Reggie looks like me, or I can relate to him, or I even like him, he has this mystery, right? Because one of the things he says is, I have my reasons. I need to get Gans too, right? And he's meant to be untrustworthy in that way. And when you have untrustworthy and charm, it becomes this kind of like vicious circle, right? Now, the way Eddie plays it in the entire film is, and Eddie has this thing where he can be street smart, which is why I think he eventually got Beverly Hills Cop, is that he's street smart, but if he's a criminal, he's not a Gans. He's not psychotic. He's maladjusted, deformed socially because of his upbringing, and probably maybe even just because of his race, right? Like if he was white, he would be good. I think it probably, whatever lies in your kind of imperial imaginary, it can kind of stretch in that way, right? A thing that Manthea Diawara says that I thought was really good is that in prison, who do we see him next to as a black person? So he's taken out of jail and he's thrust into, granted, a criminal world, but it's not, he's under, in a criminal world under white rules and white control. So he knows everything, as you see in the movie. He's really, really, he knows all this kind of stuff that like Jack would never be able to pick up on. But because he's essentially controlled by Jack Cates, he's under kind of white rules, not kind of under white rules, and they literally with a legal document. So it's slavery. It's like it's extending the narrative of enslavement, right? It's like the new idea of slave society, right? That because he was jailed, he has a deserved subordinate position to white power, and he's now going to be dangled, right? And because he was in prison, you're not supposed to trust him even though you like him. So it's like it's this like titillating feeling, right? But also like, yeah, Reggie also he gets and you'll see it variously times in the movie, he does slick shit, right? And we have to constantly, and becomes like the other big thing, keep him in check, right? Until he realizes that he can't really get away with shit. So basically, he'll go along. And it's also a bit moral too.
Yeah, so there's the whole scene, like you said, so they talk, right? There's a negotiation basically. Hammond is like, "Look, I can't do anything for you here. I need to get out on the street." Cates knows that there's some, that he could tell him, but Cates is also short on time, so he's like, "All right, I don't want to try to like, I don't have any leverage in this situation. Let me get this guy out and do this." Knows he's, he does that illegally. Of course, he does get a prison guard to go right along with him, signing this paperwork to take him for 48 hours, right? This is where you get the real time constraint in the film. And yeah, so then there's that. He goes back, gets Hammond out, and Hammond comes out in his nice suit. There's the whole back and forth of, oh, they give out $400 suits in here. No, it's $900. I bought it. I like to look good for the ladies. You get set up this whole thing, like part of what they want to do throughout this movie with Hammond, which is I mean, on some level, it's understandable, but it's just gross and over determining within like the whole plot is that he wants to get with a woman, right? Like he's been in there for 2.5 years. Like he's got to get with a woman. And it's so central and overplayed within the whole script. Um, then there's this back and forth. Hammond says, "Hey, take off the bracelets or no deal," basically. And Kate says, "You just don't get it, do you, Reggie? There isn't any deal. I own your ass." Hammond says, "No way to start a partnership." He says, "Get this. We ain't partners. We ain't brothers. We ain't friends. I'm putting you down and keeping you down until Gans is locked up or dead. And if Gan gets away, you're going to be sorry we ever met." And then the line, "Shit, I'm already sorry," which Eddie does a great job with. But that like you said, this idea, I mean, and it's direct within the script that, yeah, Hammond is just the property. He is strict. It is a master slave, relationship, and controls everything within it, which I think is interesting in all kinds of ways for like critical work in response to this film, and I'm sure is part of also why um part of why you teach it and all of that is that there's a paradigm here that is actually important because their relationship is really that. And Eddie Murphy's character, and seeing that as kind of like a prism for Eddie Murphy within the movie industry, I think is interesting, right? Because it's like you have to you have to stay within these confines, and we'll let you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but like ultimately I'm the boss and I'm in charge here.
And every now and then we have to remind you that we have control. Like when you step out of line a little bit, you take up too much space, and with force, right? Not like or with force, embarrassment, condemnation, right? And this is like literally like the entire cycle of the film until like the shift where Reggie almost becomes self-policing in a way, right? And then at the end, of course, he does go back to jail, which I think is like the biggest thing, right? It's not like he gains freedom or he's even ever given the opportunity. It's not like the plot of the movie isn't do this and you'll get out of jail next week. Right. The plot is basically just do this to protect my money. And the other funny thing about the sex part I think is interesting is that granted, this would be corny too, but it isn't you gotta do something for me. What? I gotta go see my mom. Right. Or even with the money, I got money. I gotta give it to my child. Right? They don't do that. They make it basically he has a selfish want to basically protect his funds for his whatever, plans of being a hot shot in the streets, you know? And so yeah, so like they start their kind of like car relationship and like they're giving like the kind of back and forth between each other. He requests a gun, Reggie, because like I'm out here on the street, which like to me is sensible actually. He's like, I'm about to go muck it up. And like, Cates is like, absolutely not, right? He shuts him down. And the first thing they do is to go get Luther, right? Is to go find Luther. And they go to Luther's apartment, right? And this is the other thing that like goes into the kind of racism of it. I mean, essentially he becomes a tracking dog, right? Reggie's a tracking dog, and that's like the thing with like the racist Tonto thing with Gans. He has a tracking, it's just like the logics when you like kind of pull back, it's just like so bad, right? So he becomes like this, like he's like an advanced tracking dog, right? As a human, right? He barks, it gets annoying, so you gotta pull his chain, you know. So they go to get Luther, right? And I think I'm pretty sure Reggie tells him like he's probably gonna try to shoot you. So like Kate's like barrels in, doesn't see Luther, then Luther like shoots, right? And like runs around, and the person who's able to subdue Luther is Reggie because Luther's not looking, and Reggie hits him with the car door, right? And there's like this shot, like a low shot where you get to see Reggie, and Reggie then grabs Luther's gun, right? So this is the interesting part because when Cates comes out, the very first thing he does is point the gun at Reggie to be like, put the gun down, right? And like, this is also where like contrivance in movies is just really important to understand because like in a screenwriting class, they say, well, of course he has to do that because like the guy has the gun and he's the criminal. But I'm saying, but you're contriving a situation where the white overseer has to discipline the black slave, right? You're just making it up, right? So we have to see it. And it becomes one of the first big disciplining moments of Kate's towards Reggie.
Yeah, especially because it would be perfectly logical for Kate's to say like, well, first I need to deal with Luther and then I can deal with Reggie. Like he's still handcuffed to the fucking steering wheel. Like, the fact that he has a gun, okay. Like, was he going to shoot me and then just sit there, handcuffed to the steering wheel until the cops come along or whatever? But yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously this is the point, and it happens again and again in the film of, Kate's having to discipline and keep Reggie in line, even though as an audience you're watching it and it's clear that Reggie is not at all trying to get anything over on Kate's. Like he's trying to help him catch. He's actually the best cop in the movie, actually, in a funny kind of way, right? Which is intentional. And yeah, so anyway, there is that whole scene.
And then like he beats the shit out of Luther.
Absolutely, totally brutal.
On that door.
Yeah.
Like, and it's all because Luther won't talk. I mean, the excessive force. And this is the other thing about contrivance, because we know that Luther is hiding something. So we'll go, well, he deserves it because he's hiding it. But like, no one deserves excessive force. Like, this is how they play on the imaginary. So that like when you hear about excessive force, you think, well, what? Well, why did the cop need to do that? There has to be a reason the cop felt they needed to do that. I mean, it's really bad on the psyche. It's really, really bad on the psyche.
Yeah, and so, and in this, like now that Reggie's disarmed, he plays the good cop, basically, right? And he's like, yeah, Luther, you better tell this boy something. And then, as Luther's getting beat up by Kate's, Reggie's like, Luther, are you angry with me? And then Jack Cates comes in and then he delivers the watermelon line. He says, I don't know what you're smiling at, watermelon, which is like, I mean, there are so many racial slurs and epithets in this film, right? Like it's a lot of that.
In 90 minutes. Like it's a ton, right? And it's funny in the shot where he calls him watermelon, like the fact that he's calling watermelon, he's smiling. I mean, it's just so woo. It's like a close shot. You see Eddie smile. It's just really the way it's even lit with Eddie's skin tone. It's really, really bad, right? So Luther doesn't talk, and they take him to jail. They take him to jail for what? What are the charges again? Because I remember it being weird.
He says like basically that it was like, um, avoid like, resisting
Avoiding,
arrest and like
right?
something else. Like, it was just like kind of typical, which honestly is what cops would do,
Do
right? Like,
right.
um, the other thing too is, and I don't remember exactly where this is in the sequence, right? But they eventually get out of him where Billy Bear is, right? Or isn't that what
Hmm.
they get out of him? That he's at the Mission District, which is a whole other thing
Yes.
because the mission is historically in that period of time. Like now it's like so white, so heavily gentrified, but in that period it was predominantly Latino. Um, but the there's this back and forth between Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte around Cates's like what's your problem, kind of what's your deal with your girl kind of thing. And um there's this line from Cates. He says she's got the same problem as half the goddamn population, can't get a job she's trained for, and it pisses her off, and she, belly aches about it all the time, or something like that. Like that. Which is like the
I,
little bit of like social commentary within the film, like
yeah, I
just a little
found
bit.
that so interesting. It's almost like this kind of, I don't even know what it is because that's 82. That's like it's made like in the first year of Reagan. So I don't know if that's like a Jimmy Carter critique.
Probably,
Probably.
yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
it's
just the whole like 70s, like they have a
yeah,
big decline and into the early 80s, and
right.
just like the
Austerity, yeah, the
yeah.
austerity era, neoliberalism very early on. Right. So yeah, I caught that line. And then like they also go next level into Reggie's trim quest, where he sees like two sex workers and he tries to kind of broker something with them, and it juxtaposes it with that with like Kate's seriousness on the situation, right? Kate's eventually like reins him back in from doing that, and Reggie kind of begins his plea like of like, hey, this is something that I need, and then then they have a thing about like hunger. So he's you've been treating me like shit. I want some food, right? And he's like, I want to, and it's funny because this is the thing that's so toxicated about Eddie is that Eddie just knows how to play scenes so well. He's like, I want some candlelight. Like it's the way Eddie plays shit. It's just like so good, right? And then but that's what it's what's pernicious about it because you get into it, right? So you're like, yeah, that's right, get him some food, right? And then they discipline Eddie, Reggie, but also discipline you for connecting with that, right? Because then what does he do? He takes him to a vending machine and gives him a Zagnut, right? And it's like it's deflating. Like it's like the constant if you're identifying with Hammond, you're constantly getting smacked, right? By Kate's. And it's really a fascinatingly like fucked up like device, right? So it then begins, kind of staying with the whole thing of like him thinking about his girlfriend. They get back in the car, they start having, and then there's like their first like connecting moment, right? Where like Kate begins to open up about their problems, but Reggie likes to keep it base, right? He says he asks about like her breast size and all that type of stuff, right? And like, and then of course Nolte rejects that. So is this the part where they talk about them having sex, or is that later? I think it's
I
later.
think Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I mean, there is this
Yeah.
constant kind of thing, like you said, of Reggie trying to get, I mean, the way I read it to I guess to somewhat, it's not, there's no defending it, but it's just sort of this idea is like Reggie Hammond is incredibly horny, right? And it's like he's like take anything that he will get at this point, like he's been deprived, right? And so it's just like, look, if you're not gonna get me a girl, like tell me about your girl, kind of thing. Um,
Well, he does say that. He's like, I think he does say something to that effect. Like, even stories will get me happy. I haven't heard, all I've heard is stories of
yeah,
people like thinking about it. I want to hear the real thing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they make a bet at this point too, right? That is basically like if I help you catch this guy, you will help me get laid before I go back, basically, is like kind of the it's well bet maybe is the wrong word, but there is a like it's like if you don't what was there is a little bit of a, like, carrot and stick to the whole thing, but I can't
Mhm.
remember it exactly, but, um
Well, it
and
happens when they get to the bar because the other
right.
part gets attached to it about
That's right.
be because what happens
That's
is
right.
Kate also knows that there's things that Reggie's not telling him.
Right.
So in this discourse, you end where they end is at the hillbilly bar, which is like, the eve of like really they say this is the scene that made Eddie Murphy a movie star. They said like this
Is it
scene.
just on a believability standpoint too, like, I found this a little bit I was, like, stretching, I'm like, "Maybe that's possible," but having a Confederate bar in the middle of the Mission District in San Francisco that was full of white rednecks, I
Yeah,
was like,
I wanted to hit some homies up about this who grew up in the Bay, who have like the memory of that. And if any of the homies who watch this, I know I got some Bay homies who check in on this, who know that. Check, I would love to know about this because it did feel a little unbelievable. I know that there's like the kind of thought that there were like certain in California that there were certain kinds of more conservative, like white factions. But I'm like, but in the mission in
yeah.
81, 82, that just seems off to me.
Yeah, it would be interesting, yeah, for somebody like Brooke Terpstra if they watch this
Yeah,
later
Brooke,
or,
please let us
yeah, yeah.
let us know. That is something seems
Um,
weird about that, but maybe we don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's obviously a specific device within the film, whether it's real or not, but it did seem a little bit. I mean, I grew up in the early 80s in Southern Oregon, and
Yeah,
even the idea there, which there's way more like pro-Confederate folks in that neck of the woods than there is in, the Mission District in San Francisco. And even the idea of having a whole bar kind of themed around Confederate flags and rednecks,
yeah,
it was like it's like, no, that's not gonna happen in the 80s.
yeah. Someone wrote that there are Nazis in Cali. I don't doubt that.
Oh, for sure there are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think our more question is like where they place them in the mission, but maybe we don't know the history of the 80s that well with it. But
yeah.
it did just seem off. I agree with you. So when they get
There's
there,
also just like
but
the people who are there, right? Like this is part of it too. It's not that you can't have that there aren't white supremacists or Nazis
yeah,
in any like that's true for sure.
the
But
hillbilly thing,
it's
right?
like literally like they took like an Alabama like population and like dropped it into the mission for this scene. It's like I don't think it would be quite like that.
But that's also a very like I mean, and that's movies though. Like they like these weird, whether it's an anachronism or like strange never happenisms, right? And to kind of make things up, like like I think of Predator 2, where they had a Jamaican drug mafia. Where's their Jamaican drug mafias ever in Los Angeles? I'm sorry, that never happened and existed ever, right? Partly because that script was meant to be in New York, but even then, Jamaican drug anyway, we don't have to get into that one. But yeah, so like the deal is made there because Nolte, Kate's is like, I know you got some shit you're hiding on me, right? Hiding from me about it. And basically, like the whole deal is like Reggie thinks he can be successful in getting the information if he poses as a cop in this spot, right? Kate is not convinced. So basically, whoever loses or wins gets something in turn, right? So and this is like a really, really famous scene. And I do teach this scene. Like I said, I have a breakdown of this scene because it is fascinating on like a multitude of levels.
Also, I just want to say quickly, like the fact that this is the bar that Billy Bear hangs out in, and
It's
that nobody
another
has an issue
yeah.
with that is like white
Well,
racists don't like indigenous people. In case you didn't
so
know.
this is I mean, this kind of goes back and like this is where I would really love like I'd be curious at what like what Nick Estes would say about this kind of assumption that there is some because how I read it was that there is some kind of like relationship between racist whites and indigenous folks that like has a certain kind of I was like, well, that seems kind of bullshit. Like I didn't buy it as a thing at all, right? And I'd be curious, like, just like what people would say about that because like it felt so like, why would Billy work at this bar? Why would they accept him, right? It just made no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I I think it's a lot of this, like we're kind of trying to apply, logic to these things in ways that is just like the script writers are just dumb and
And they're
not that serious.
racist.
Like, yeah, they're racist and they're like, dude, I'm just gonna do this thing,
Yeah,
and they didn't even think about like bothering. It's like, well, why does Billy Bear want to hang out in the Confederate bar so much? And why are all these, people who are so anti-black just fine with that?
it doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah, and like so Reggie goes into the bar. He gets a badge. He gets Jack's badge, right? And he goes in, and one of the very first things you see is like the bar like, is shot. It's like very large, and you have this shot very prominently of a white woman, pretty much half naked, dancing, right? And she's kind of like the centerpiece of like the action as like they're dancing like to like the hillbilly, music. And like the way Reggie kind of walks in, certain people notice him, but in a way they're like still distracted by her, right? Like he doesn't take total focus, right? So he's coming in, right? He goes right to the bartender, played by homie who was in a lot of John Carpenter movies. He was in Prince of Darkness. I always forget his name. Um, I always like his roles. I mean, it's like a quick little role for him. So they begin talking at the bar, right? And like
It's his name is Peter Jason is his name.
Peter Jason, yeah. So he's like in the classic Eddie, like Eddie, even little shit that Eddie does, it's so intoxicated. Like the music is loud. He's like, so can I get a drink? Preferably some vodka, like he's just like, like, right? And then the guys, what about a black Russian? And like, back to the racism. And Eddie, this was something that someone wrote about years ago. They said what Eddie did was Eddie was really good at things that would come at him from like the other characters, deflecting it as like it doesn't pain him. He could still be like smarter than everybody and like get because he just does like his like he had the ability to make you look stupid, right? So he does that, and what happens is the guy's not really like, he's asking him about Billy Bear and all this type of stuff, and the guy's not helping him. So what Eddie begins to do is throw. He basically takes the vodka glass and he throws it at the back mirror, right? Which then shatters and like cuts everything off. And then it goes into like the next step. And
I always think it's funny in scenes like this when the music actually stops. I'm
I
like, the music
know
wouldn't stop, like,
like,
but it's like,
I've seen bar fights. The music did not stop. I've seen glasses thrown at mirrors in a bar. The music did not stop. It kept playing. Sorry. It's like the bad movie effect. You know, the record skips, right? So that happens, and then Eddie begins his kind of tour de force, right? Where he embarrasses all the rednecks. And this is the thing that I think is interesting because it makes you think about what like Walter Hill's kind of own socio-political framework is, where like they don't mind, like liberal Hollywood does not mind the embarrassment of hillbillies because they see them also as slightly lower stock as well, right? Um, and but at the same token, you'll see after the scene, while Eddie's allowed to do this and Reggie's allowed to do this, he has to then be reined in at the very end. So he goes through this whole process of like, they just try to attack him. And like, he has the kung fu, he can fight him, right? Kate ends up helping him. And the other thing to really remember with like the shots of it is Kate's hides. And in a way, even though you're identifying with Eddie, you're still a spectator because they have these key shots of Kate's looking at him where you go back to identifying as the person watching Eddie do it. Right. So it becomes this like spectacle that you're able to kind of witness. You're able to get to witness like, this like special display of blackness, right? In overcharge. Let loose. He's Hammond Unchained, right? And he goes into these these like different things where he's saying shit. He lines up a bunch of them around a wall who try to get away or he beat up. He takes out their stuff and he pockets it, right? Very slickly, right? He takes a little gun, a knife. He doesn't pocket the money, which I found interesting. He throws the money at the guy, right? When he gets the wad, right? And they ask, what kind of cop are you? I'm your worst nightmare, an N-word with a badge, right? Which is like a big, big, big thing, right? And he says like his big famous like proclamation lines, like I don't like rednecks, white people, right? And it becomes this huge, huge thing. And it's very celebrated, this scene, right? For Eddie as like a kind of like triumph of black people in Hollywood. It's really like thought as that by many, right? Like he triumphs. And people get very intoxicated by this. And I think this is I'm gonna say something. I think this is very instructive, even for things that happened last night that people are celebrating. I'm going to say, right? Because you can't think about the single moment. You have to think about how it falls into the totality that's around it, right? So he does all of it, puts on the cowboy hat, right? There's a new sheriff in town, right? And his name is Reggie Hammond, right? Right. Someone wrote a great line. Eddie is a device, not a protagonist. Exactly. He's a device, right? He's so because you get this moment of identification, right? And like it's very intoxicating. I remember I used to love fucking watching to see him beat up the white people, mess with them, right? It was just great. And so when he gets out of it, and we can go back to a little bit of it in a minute, but when he gets out of it, right, the immediate thing that Kate goes to is give me the gun and give me the knife, right? And he's like, "Oh, you caught that, right?" The Eddie, and what's I mean, this is where like Eddie's just a smart actor, but like his smarts also like fuck it up for people like long run, like him not negative reacting, like he kind of takes it in, like it makes you like him more, right? And you begin to like him as you see him get, but then you also realize his disciplining is necessary, right? Because he's a criminal, right? He is a criminal and he has to be reined in.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit with Trading Places as well, and I'm thinking of like Jared Ball's work, and I'm sure you've delved into this as well. The Cosby effect discussion and which somebody else came up with that term initially. I can't remember actually who, but Jared was talking about it with relation to Chappelle recently. And Eddie Murphy, I think, is in an interesting, place within it because it's true that I don't know, I can't think of any movies that Eddie Murphy has ever been in where you ever truly felt like his character was threatening in some kind of way. Right. And I think this is a good example of that because you have this, scene in which yeah, he's going up against all of these, racists, kind of scary whites in this, establishment and all of this stuff. And, he's breaking stuff and he takes weapons off of people and all of this. But he is immediately disarmed by Nick Nolte's character, by Kate's, and then the way that he responds to it is disarming, right? Like he makes a little joke, "Oh, you caught that." You little joke about it, kind of this slick move, and you know, it's yeah. So this is part of why he was so successful and works is because for Hollywood, like that's kind of perfect. There's a little Yeah, he's both. It's kind of perfect for the whole narrative of liberal racial, uh, politics and inclusion and integration, right? Of like, you don't, even if you're a little bit scared by this thing, you don't need to be. He's going to be a good guy who's going to be on our team, right? Which is very much where this movie goes in terms of its overall trajectory. Is like that, he's the most moral, and you get the lines later on, we'll wait for them, but, he's kind of the most moral figure within the film. He's the best person within the film, but he's also, even though he's branded as a convict, and that's the way that they talk about him within the film, as the con, right? Um, that yeah, he's totally not a real threat, right? He's a thief, and he's kinda wily, right? But ultimately, he'll just hand over the knife and the gun to you, basically, if you ask.
Yeah, because even in the sequence where he's in the hillbilly bar, it's a con. He's not a cop. So it's more about his cunningness than like his actual ability to be like militaristically threatening. Like when we get to Beverly Hills Cop, Taggart is more of a force um than say what's his, I forget, Foley, right? Foley's the whole actual Foley thing is that he's just so smart, right? He's quick, right? And that's what they like about Eddie, but like kind of imposing or threatening, no, they don't go there, right? And so like the next, because then like because even with this with Kate's, because then the next sequence that happens is they go to Billy's ex, right? And she lives like across like down the street, and they basically barrel in there, right? And like, try to get info, and she's like, look, I don't fuck with Billy no more. He owes me money, right? He ain't coming back, right? Eddie has a few more weird sex lines, about it. Like, it's just so the movie just its thing with it is a little too much. But more importantly is the scene after that. Because what happens is Kate gets super frustrated. He's basically hit a dead end, right? Like they don't know where Gans and Billy are. He still also doesn't really know what's happening, right? Is who are these people's real relationship to each other? He knows they have one, and he's tired of Reggie like not telling him. So they get into an argument, and he's basically like, "Look, man, unless you tell me, I'm gonna bust your ass," right? And then in classic like street do fashion, Reggie's like, "No, like, no, you're not. You ain't gonna do nothing, right?" And then that's when Cage throws out the N word, right?
He
And I
does,
have to
and before that, he says spear chucker too, before that.
Spear Chucker. We're before that in the same sequence. And I have to say, I've seen this movie so many times. Whenever Kate says the N word, it just goes like, they just really said this shit. They really said, like, they really did this. I was like, what? Like, I'm like, wow, right? And you get basically the two of them get into an elongated fist fight. And I also find the fist fight fascinating. Not because of the badge editing with Eddie's fighting stunt double. It's like really badly edited. It's like really, they really have it's just a really bad edit.
Yeah, I'm like, who is that 50-year-old? Like,
Dude, he's like wide and shit. I'm like, oh, y'all went and got like Sugar Ray Leonard. What the fuck are y'all doing? Right? But um like he has the kind of, speaking of Sugar Ray, he's like a slick boxer, right? He's throwing jabs, right? Boom, 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 boom. Like ethical boxing almost, right? Like he has this kind of way he moves, and Cage is just like brute force, right? And it's funny because like I remember when I hadn't seen the movie for a long time, I forgot who won. And there's a way that like you kind of, if you think about it your first time, you don't know who's going to win a little bit, because like it's kind of like, slick street shit versus like the brutal force of Kate's. Of course, Cates eventually overpowers him because he has so much more power. And like one of the final shots before the cops come and stop it is him just giving Reggie like back and forth. Like he's got him, right? Just like knocking him. And the cops come in, they put their guns on him because there's two dudes fighting in the street. And the women have called the cops on them, basically saying that two dudes tried to break in posing as cops. And he says, go get my bags. They're like bloody faced, right? The cops are like annoyed by this, which is like another like kind of like Cates just does weird shit, right? And they tell me you deal with it. They get back in the car, right? And this is the big part for me that like is like the cementer, and I talk about it in my thing, right? What does Cates do? He sucker punches Hammond right in the face, and
Right
the
after
car drives
taking
off.
another swig of whiskey from his flask, and then and he punches
And
him.
then whack. And it's like, this is like the high point of discipline, right? This is the culmination. And this is what I kind of talked about, is that after that euphoria that you get, and it's what I've always experienced, that euphoria of that sequence, right? It's always, it's like heavily managed by Reggie just getting brutalized. And I think there is a more fucked up effect that Reggie does fight back, but he loses. Right. And it's like, it's really fucking deflating. And like, it's hateful. I experience it as extremely hateful whenever I think I always did. I just didn't understand it. But then when I got to understand it, I realized how hateful it is. And you have to rein in black men because they have this thing and they're really good at it too. But they'll go too far, and to basically get shit out of them, you got to beat the living crap out of them.
Yeah. This particular scene, and just the comfort with this panoply of racial epithets and things like that throughout the film is the reason that I say this movie couldn't be made today. It's not that you don't get the dynamics of this movie, but it has to be muted in certain ways. You could say things that are, you know, quote unquote like dog whistles, right? You can have things within the film that are obviously racist and where it's clear that the person that's saying them or doing them is racist. But Hollywood is no longer comfortable with creating the Jack Cates character as unfiltered as it is here. And this is an interesting thing because you have, this was also Year of the Dragon, I think, is very similar, in this kind of way. You you have a lot of conservative people who this is kind of where Hollywood loses them, right? And they're like, "Hey, we need that back. That's real." Right? Like that's real. And you hear people talk about this even sometimes on the left or, whatever, like this idea that um that there was something more authentic, I guess. And this is an interesting thing. This is one of the questions I sort of have about this kind of movie because obviously the problem I have is that there's so much that is done in this film in terms of different propaganda and stuff that's totally unbelievable. So the idea that you're presenting something that's authentic in any way is like just a farce, right? There's nothing authentic about this movie at all. But Jack Cates's character, I think, is a quite believable character of a cop, right? And of a certain kind of American mentality. And I think, but what's interesting is then like, and this gets into the question or the role of Hollywood as propaganda, within empire, is it, to whose benefit is it to show that realness? And also like, what does that putting Cates out there like that and having him be this type of character, like what attitudes is it teaching? What is taught by Jack Cates in terms of how you get shit done and what, a successful police officer looks like, and all of this is like, deeply fucked up messaging that's being delivered there that then people kind of like could tap into. But it is fascinating, Mtume, to think about this and the impact that this had on us, watching these movies as kids. I mean it Yeah, I mean I it is a wild scene, and like you say, it's hateful. I mean, it's deeply kind of fucked up, but it does speak also in some ways. It's laying out a dynamic in like kind of pure form, in terms of like white power, white supremacy, policing, racial capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Yeah, like I think about how it could socialize non-black people when they have to deal with white power. Like knowing like their limits, whether it's like in school, anything. And then I think about, 'cause I think Case is interesting because like, yeah, like I'm sure a good amount of white people with particular political dispositions, I don't even think they have to even be left. Like liberal would like find Kate's deplorable and would resist a complete identification with him. I do think there is certain white males and white women too within a certain imaginary, and they probably would never admit it, that would find the disciplining of Reggie satisfying because it's the kind of disciplining they want to do to certain black people and black men that they can't actually do in real life. And that's a thing about movies. There is that transference, right? Um and yeah, and that's where like I think when people are not honest about this movie and like this kind of like relationship it like depicts, that people, because I and they're not honest, they don't think they want to be honest about like the shit that I just said, right? You know what I'm saying? They don't want to admit, or like or like the one that's probably the most pervasive. It doesn't happen as much in this movie, but it happens writ large. Is when we talk about movies that hate women, and like when you try to like have that conversation, and they go, "Oh man, come on, bro! Like it doesn't hate women. I'm not saying they're depicted bad, but hate women's a little much." And I'm like, look, if every depiction of a movie has right women either being a nag, you justify them being brutalized or like kicked to the side, called, well, I forgot what he called, sweet pants, right? And the only time you think about what an affection is, and I put this in quotations, is when you want to have some sex. Like, come on, dude, it hates women. Stop. Like, stop having those arguments. It's fucking clear, dude. It's just so real, right? And it provides like just a lift for people in that way.
Yeah. Um
So I guess now we get to where Reggie, and this is the thing,
so the money.
he beats him up, but that's the thing. But he beats him up, and then Reggie reveals it, right? Because then he
Right.
threatens him again, right?
Right.
And he basically admits that Reggie, and I find this interesting, and they totally fuck it up in the sequel. It's really badly done in the sequel. Reggie and the crew with Gans, Luther, Henry. I was thinking that line. The way Eddie plays when he sees Henry's face, he's like, "Yeah, that's my friend Henry. He's seen better. He's seen better days." Like it's the way Eddie plays shit. It's just so good. I just laughed my ass off because like no one can play shit like that. Yeah, you see better days. It's just so good. But they reveal that they basically stole money from a drug dealer, right? And it's the kind of money it's the kind of money you can't report, right? Stolen, right? And it basically like gets Kate's into a kind of next level of like shit, like there's shit you don't even know that's happening, and that's where like, and that's Reggie's so deep in it, right? That he has that extra knowledge, right? And that's like the big reveal, right? That there is this kind of thing that happened, and there's this big thing of money, and that it's in Reggie's car, which is a Porsche, hanging out in a parking garage. And Luther, which I never quite understood, but I get why he would trust Luther so much with this shit. But like that Luther has the ticket, right? And basically, like, I guess he's gonna hold on to the money. $500,000, I believe, is the amount of money. Until Reggie gets out, which is a little convoluted with like things about the money. I don't quite get some of it, but that's essentially the big ticket item. And Kate gets this information, and they go wait for Luther to basically go get it, because that's the thing that we know from the beginning. Kind of explains the beginning, where Luther is like, yeah, I can't wait. I got to get it on Monday.
This is like there is the convolute, but one of the things that bothers me here is that Hammond, of course, offers to split the money with Cates, right? Because he figures, hey, if I tell this cop that I got $500 million, like I have to cut him in on it. Otherwise, I'm going to lose all of it. And so he offers him a 50-50 split, like right off the top, too. Like, yeah, we'll just split it down the middle. And Cates's response is just like, it's like, it's so ridiculous, right? Because you're in the era like not too far from Serpico. Like there's all kinds of police corruption going on, all of this, right? And we know that Cates is, an alcoholic. He abuses, he's terrible to women. He's an abusive officer that frequently engages in police brutality as just a part of how he does his police work, right, on a regular basis. And yet we're supposed to believe that he's like, he is morally too high and has higher standards, that he don't want anything. And the only thing he says is like, basically that you could give me a car loan, and it's a loan, right? It's not even that I would, take money from you, but you could give me a loan to get a new convertible or whatever, because his convertible's a piece of shit. But yeah, anyway, that also bothered me within all this.
Yeah, and like, I need to talk to somebody about this who might know, because the 70s, granted, they, it has its own problems. With things like Serpico, there was this kind of, and granted, it has its limitations, willingness to talk about the crookedness of cops. But it seemed by the 80s, if they wanted to do it, it had to be an isolated crooked cop. It couldn't be like what Serpico said, like it's the whole department, and he couldn't be the exception, right? Basically, what this movie wants to say is they are ethical, even though they do excessive force. They won't take bribes. They're just insufficient in their policing duties, and they need to be more like Cates, or eventually Riggs and Murtaugh, or good old John McClane. They gotta have all that. And it's funny, these are all Joel Silver movies.
Yeah.
Like Joel Silver is the dude on this shit.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like you don't really, I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of movies we could think of in between, like the Serpico, like Chinatown. Although Chinatown is another interesting, not Chinatown.
Yeah.
Chinatown is interesting, but that's not what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of what's the Gene Hackman
French Connection.
French Connection, where, yeah, I mean, that's more prototype for Cates, actually, is Hackman in the French Connection.
Right. But at the end of the French Connection, and granted, like I said, Friedkin has his own problems. It's a criticism of Doyle.
Yeah.
Right. That Doyle goes too far. Right. Death Wish, which would be more next to this film, is seen as conservative in the mid 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
it's like a fascinating thing about the
Yeah.
shifting of that type of shit. I haven't done a real analysis of it, but I think it's very interesting. I'm sure someone probably has, and if someone could point it to me, send it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot that Luther was the guy who clanks the bottles and says warriors come out and play.
Ooh,
Like, uh,
yeah, come. To that point, Remar is in Warriors. Um, Sonny Landham is in Warriors briefly. There's a couple more who are in Warriors. There's a lot of
yeah.
Warriors people in this movie, And in general, he tended Walter Hill tended to be a person who used a lot of the same people, especially in like the character actor roles.
It's funny too. There's another weird Nick Nolte line in this movie is he says, "Class isn't something you buy. Look at you. You've got a $500 suit and you're still a low life." But then
Right.
Eddie, of course, yeah, but I look good.
Yeah, but I look good. Right. And if other people said the line, you'd be like, "Oh, this is so stupid." But it's just Eddie. He's just a damn good actor, right? Or like the sequence that I love is when they're in the car and he's like, "Jack, tell me a story," right? And he's like, "Fuck you." He's like, "I love that one." And because it's just this is like the thing of good acting. He does it. Eddie does it. He doesn't comment on what he's doing. He just does it. Right? He just responds. Like it's actually just a very confident, like loose, strong actor. So they're now waiting for Luther, and you begin to see there's like a kind of because Reggie has like opened up to him a little bit and told him the information. I think by this point Jack opens up more about his relationship with his girlfriend. I believe it's happened at this point a little bit more that there's like a big of a qualitative shift in how they're kind of responding to each other. Even when like Jack like messes with the door, he does it more playfully, not angrily, right? And you get them waiting for Luther, right? And you see Luther, basically go get the car, and you kind of get into like the next big action sequence where they follow Luther into the train sequence, where there's like a big gun battle in the middle of a crowd, which like
At the San
Hollywood just
Francisco at the Muni, that's what
the
that
Muni, yeah, the
metro was
Muni,
called. Yeah,
yeah, the Muni.
yeah.
So they just love to have big gun fights in the middle of crowds in movies.
Yeah, and there's also the hilarious part of that too, where Kate's like has the killers in the sights, right? Because so yeah, Luther goes to the car, gets the money, they chase after them. Basically, they get into the Muni, and uh, Kate's pulls his gun out and is like, got him in the sights, and two transit cops, right? They're like, if you don't put your gun away, we're gonna shoot you, basically. Drop it or you're done. That's what they say. Even after he goes, I'm a cop. And the cop killers are laughing as they get away, which I actually think that this series, that little scene, again, is an important piece of propaganda, of messaging within the film, right? Because the idea is that these cops are more concerned with procedure and kind of policing themselves than they are with like what's necessary to actually get the cop killers with $500,000 that are on the train, right now, basically. Um, and so there is that's the thing about the commentary around policing. Once you make this shift into the 80s, it's that the incompetence is always like abiding by principle, or like abiding by police procedure too much, basically, like being too, like they're worried about this guy pulling a gun out on the platform. Even when he tells them he's a cop, they basically say, if you don't put that thing away, we're going to blast you, right? Like, it's almost cartoonish, right? But this is the kind of, is the Keystone Cops. When we do some of these police academy films, which we have to do, like it's a big narrative throughout the 80s. Yeah.
I keep hearing in my head, "Believe cops." Oh man, because
free
that's what it
free
is.
free cops from the oppressive forces of police procedure.
A police procedure. Because that's like the whole thing. It's like they're they're just insufficient. The beat cop, doesn't know, and they don't have the ability to take down the Ganses and the Billies, and then it's funny because I remember like I'm watching the movie and I'm like, oh man, we haven't really seen Gans and Billy for like a long time in the movie. And I this watch made me realize like how absent they are in the movie, even more than most criminals in films, villains or antagonists. They don't really have a presence other than like they're just the most crazy brutal duo you're ever gonna encounter, right? Like they don't have much sequences. Um, so they do all that. The beat cost messed it up, and then you get transferred right to Black San Francisco. Right, you get you right there, right? Like it's just like it's it's really like it does make you think about, especially like in that time of the early 80s, of blackness and like musical culture. Um it how Eddie's a part of that as well, in his own career, right? And because the whole sequence, I mean, he says it to Kate's, right? I'm at Froman's. Yeah, of course you don't know nothing about this place. This is where the black people are, right? And like, yes, that is a thing, right? That is a thing. Trust me, especially back in the 80s. And my mother, that's like my mother's era of like knowing shit and like the kind of the black music clubs, the black comedy clubs, which is what Eddie came out to. There was a big like convergence of those two kind of elements in cities, the kind of legends of it, and you get this sequence of like these dudes is rocking, like they're rocking in there. I just want to like they're in there rocking, right? Like you get it, you get that high energy, just really, really, the Bus Boys, right? And I think they were. I don't know if Eddie knew them before, but he worked with them a bit after when Eddie was doing his, his musical career.
If people don't know, Eddie Murphy had a musical career that includes multiple albums and all of this.
Party
My
all the
girl likes to party all the
Party all
time.
the time. His really weird song with Shabba Ranks, "I Was a King." Remember that one? His joint with Michael Jackson. I mean,
Yeah,
like, look,
Michael. Yeah.
I mean, think about that one. Michael don't collaborate. That's how you know Eddie Murphy was fucking huge. Michael don't collaborate. Paul McCartney
Right.
and Eddie
Paul
Murphy.
McCartney.
You know what I'm saying? Like, Janet, his sister. You know what I'm saying? Like Michael don't collaborate, but Eddie got him for a track. It's funny. So yeah, and the other thing is to add with the film is that Cates has lost him, right? And he's like frustrated, doesn't know where he is, right? Thinks that basically, remember he has to get him back in 48 hours. And Eddie's at the club, trying his best to get woman, but it ain't working. Go ahead.
Well, it's just a whole, I mean, like you said, it's such a strange transition, right? Because you go from the platform and, I had to go back and rewatch, like, did I miss something here? Because Eddie, what happens is they do split up because Eddie's going to go for the money, right? And Luther has the bag. So he goes to chase after Luther. And it's the strangest thing because Luther runs out of the subway and Eddie is like 4 seconds behind him. So like you never really get it. It's probably a cut. It probably was time or something like that. But you never get why Eddie stopped chasing after his $500,000 and
It's
decided
a
to go
very
to the
bad edit.
nightclub. Yeah, but so the next time you see him, he's in the nightclub and he's called up and he's left a message, which Cates learns because Cates goes back to the police station. He's like downtrodden. He's like, "Fuck, we've blown everything. We don't have any, leads and all this." And it turns out that he gets told by the other cop who's there. I forget his name, but he's like is like always at the desk. But that oh yeah, you did have a call in from what do you say, that Vice partner that you've been
Vice
working with,
Squad,
right?
someone from the
Yeah,
Vice Squad. Mhm.
yeah. And it's, yeah, like you said, it's Reggie Hammond, telling him to come to the club, basically.
Yeah, and then in the final kind of, like, closing moment of, like, Hate of Women, he basically is also on the phone with his girlfriend Elaine, and, like, at this point, every time she talks to him, she just comes in hot, and it's just like, "Gosh, jeez, give her another angle, bro." Right? And of course, they contrive the thing that in the time that he's talking to her, Keyhole gives him the message about the Reggie, so he has to put her on hold. So when he finally gets off, he goes, "Hey, guess who's there? Remember Elaine?" She goes, "Fuck you, Jack," and like that's pretty much the end. So another contrived thing of he J- Jack is going to lose a lot in order to do this duty, the civic duty. Also, that's like super important.
And I think, I mean, this is the thing too with the nightclub scene, because Hammond does the thing and actually he could do whatever. Like he could go like, I'm gonna just be escaped at this point, could go full bore solo after his money or whatever, but he goes to the nightclub and he invites Jack over. Now Jack is like, oh, this guy is really like, I now I can see how ethical, and
He
moral Eddie
invited me to
Murphy.
Blacktown.
Yeah, and so now he's like the whole, like, goes through the sequence of, racial slurs that he said. It's, hey, I didn't mean all of that stuff, and he does have something he says. He said, I was just doing my job keeping you down, though. And then Kate or Hammond says, yeah, well, doing your job, that don't explain everything. And Kate says, yeah, you're right. But they have they kind of, and then you get that classic Eddie Murphy laugh at the end of that too. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's like the liberalism thing because then it becomes racism as bad attitudes and social relationships. And if we just say the right things and we can admit our wrongs, I mean, it's something that and like I wonder if you ever saw this. You probably did see this, Jay. Really popular in like the aughts, like arts education was like white people admitting their privilege before everything. I just want to say, I'm aware of my privilege in this position, which is executive director of an organization of black, or you know what I'm saying? But and like I mean, it's the equivalent of like fucked up land
The
acknowledgments,
land
right?
acknowledgements, I was gonna say the
Yeah,
same thing. Yeah.
yeah. It's like so like because Jack admits that he engaged in racialized battery towards Reggie, and then Reggie then adds another thing. Well, you kind of gotta admit, that you kind of liked it. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Everything's good. Now we can be friends. We've talked it out, right? Now on to the next step. Because then the other thing that ends up happening is like Reggie then is like, look, I want my trim, right? And Jack is like, I'll let you get it. You know what I'm saying? I'll let you get it. So it's like he'll let off the leash for a moment. I mean, it's just like it's so
And
bad.
then what happens, right? He takes the girl, which is also, I do another ridiculous thing. I mean, just this idea that like you meet somebody and dance with them once, and then they're gonna agree to go across the street to the hotel room to have sex with you, like just like that, right? And then like again, this movie hates women so much, but um, but he does, and he convinces her to do that. There's a kind of funny scene where like she's now talking to this like really big guy, right? And he's like, what does he say? Do you remember the lines? But he's like
Something
basically,
like no, lack of sex makes you bold, right?
yeah, yeah. He's
He
like,
does
it's
like the
all like
classic Eddie,
puffs his
like,
chest up and everything.
it's funny.
But anyways, he takes her across the street, and then he sees Luther leaving with the briefcase, which that's the point, actually. That is what they give as the rationale behind all this. I did forget this. He, Eddie Murphy Hammond had said, I tracked him to the hotel across the street,
I'm waiting
but he's
for him.
checked in. He has a wake up call at 8 a.m. or whatever. We just can, so we don't have anywhere to go right now, basically. So we're just going to hang out here and we'll catch him in the morning, is kind of
Hmm.
the whole agreement of the plan. I forgot that
Right.
that is why he ends up there.
Yeah, Luther.
They still don't do a
Luther.
very good job of like connecting those dots, but yeah.
Luther hides in Blacktown, essentially, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, because that's
But the
where
thing
the
is,
cops are not going to find him.
so then he sees Luther leaving with the briefcase, and of course, okay, now my entire, mode of existence throughout this film of trying to get laid, like, okay, the money is more important, and he
Yeah.
goes and gets, but he doesn't just chase after him. He again goes and gets Kate's to help him,
Well,
chase after him.
and then but then there's also a sense, at least to me, that Reggie is now more connected to catching Luther because that's what you're supposed to do. Also, like he's now like de facto connected to the policing effort, right? I mean, there's a way you could even think about that scene where he acts like a cop, kind of imbues within him like a cop's awareness in a weird way. If you want to kind of like have that in your like your imaginary, not totally, but like it's a kind of like thing, like it kind of can kind of get within him. And then so yeah, they go Luther. They see Luther. They basically chase after him, and like just the weird ass scene of like of Billy in a bus. Like they like these motherfuckers are so wild. They didn't grab a car, they grabbed the bus.
It's so stupid, yeah.
It's so stupid. Like, what the fuck was that? Yo, let's give him a bus. And like, I don't think we've said it enough. Also, even the visual racialization of Billy is so bad because he looks like it. It's like something out of a horror film. Because like he like the door opens and he's like, I mean, like it's like Billy has no conscience. It's like I mean, he's like a devil. He's like a primitive devil. It's really it's quite insane, right? And you juxtapose this with another film that he was in, which we did, Predator, where he actually is a Tonto again. Like it's so fucking bad, right? Where he's the tracker, right?
Mhm.
In that movie, there's this way like they always like to they go into like, the whole mystical thing with it, and it's so fucking racist, right? You know,
I'm sorry, I found the lines that I was looking for earlier. So he says, Eddie, after the like kind of they have their makeup, he says, as long as you're feeling like Abraham Lincoln. That's what Hammond says to Kate's.
right.
Uh,
I'm gonna emancipate you.
and when he finds the woman with the other guy, he goes, "Hey, that's my wife." Before he jumps into the,
Right.
lack of pussy makes you brave is
Makes you
the
brave.
line that he says.
And he puts the chest out. It's so funny, man, the way Eddie does. Yeah. So they're in the truck. Luther's in there, and they got the girlfriend, poor character, who basically just that actress. That had to be that had to be a fun role to play. Right.
All
Just
the women in this film, it's like,
oh,
gosh, like
so enjoyable, I'm sure,
I can't imagine how it must have been working with the people who made this film in terms of their
Oh
attitudes and like
no.
having to be surrounded by these producers at like, ooh.
Oh my gosh, no. I mean, especially with Joel Silver later, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, not cool. So there's like a whole like Reggie and Kate's like shooting. So basically, also Reggie gets a gun by this point. That's the other thing. And Kate is like, he basically says, I don't have time to deal with this now. So now when they're shooting at the two of at Billy and Gans, it's a kind of even match now where they can kind of go back. And Gans shoots Luther. So something that I can't remember. I didn't go back. What happens to Luther's girlfriend? Did she get shot? I think they need to stop accounting for her in the movie. I swear.
Well, after they shoot, because they shoot Luther,
Do they shoot
and so
her?
I don't think it shows what happens to her, but they don't. My read on it was they at that point they have the money
Yeah.
and they, and their whole thing was like, again, it's the unprincipledness of Gans, right? He's like, give me the money and I'll let your girl go, basically, right? And then he just shoots him. um and so they just stop it. Again, the movie hates
Her,
women so much it
her
doesn't matter
character,
what happens to her.
her character
Like
just ends.
it just disappears.
She totally disappear. She's like the sister in Family Matters, right? Like she just doesn't have a character anymore. I was like, what the fuck? Wait a minute. Where is Luther's girlfriend? Like it's just so annoying, right? And of course, they can't get them in the bus. And then you get this scene, it cuts to the scene with the chief again, and he's like, and like now you have Hammond and Kate, and they're at the police desk together. And like there's a way that like way it looks like to me is like Hammond now, he's on Kate's level, is a cop, right? He's become worthy. He's like earned his stripes. He's proved
Mhm.
himself. But to the black police chief, no, 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 no. Right? I mean, I have the lines here. I mean,
Yeah.
let me see if I can find it. He goes, a bus, you goddamn whiskey Mick cop. You lost a stolen bus. Good Lord. I got 5 deaths related to
Ah,
Gids.
so Kate's is Irish. I didn't even put that together.
Neither
That
did
makes a
I.
lot of sense.
Just
Yeah.
reading this now, I got it. I got 5 deaths related to Gids, and you blow it for a lousy N-word convict. And then it beat because they both the shot of them looking at him, and he goes, "That's right. I called him an N-word. You bet I did. I saw the report on that little piece of shit. If he spent one legal day in his whole life, it'd be a record. Now, this is for you. Suspension review board, you've had it. When it gets round, you protected a con rather than." So then he cuts him. Jack says, "All right, goddammit, I'm going to tell you something about this man. He's got more brains than you'll ever know. He's got more guts than any partner I ever had." Then the chief says, just cause you say it with conviction, it don't mean shit to me. Jack starts to leave with Reggie, and then he goes, now, where the Christ do you think you're going? This is the chief. Reggie says, don't you think you're being a little hard on the guy? And the police chief says, you go fuck yourself, convict.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, like, damn.
It's just, there's so much. It's so fascinating on so many levels, right? Like, I mean, one, it's like obviously as we've talked about, the whole importance of having this character of the black police chief is to deliver these certain messages, particularly from a black authority figure, right? And we've already talked in this about, this, and I think about the point Orsami brought up to us when we talked about Lethal Weapon, and the idea that these black cops at this point, like whatever, our critique of policing within the United States is, and all of this, like they would have been among the very first generation to integrate these police forces too. They'd have to deal with so much racist fuckery and all that. But then his role is one to hold Hammond down, to instill this idea of like, being a convict, being some like permanent stamp and irredeemability and moral failing and all of this shit. And then earlier on he had the message about the cop killers, which was an important message. But then the flip is that then you have Nolte, right, who and we'll get more, because you have to get to his full arc at the end for this to really matter so much. But him being the defense now of Reggie Hammond, like basically telling his black boss, like, look, black people can do this job, whatever you think about black people. Right? Like, he's got more brains than you do for sure, or than you would ever know, but he's also the best partner I've ever had, right? And of course, within the context of the movie, this is true, right? Because Reggie Hammond is the best cop in the whole film, right? Like they don't solve this, they don't do any of this, right, without Reggie Hammond. He is the secret sauce to all of this. But it's like, And so I think that's like when you think about the archetypes within this film, right? Obviously it is it's a propaganda film. It's designed to draw people into policing. It's designed to show that as a site of integration, which is like a very clear, project of it. It's like if we're gonna have racial integration, but you need people like Reggie Hammond, right? You need black folks who understand these criminal, you know, mentalities and have this information and these connections and also just for undercover work, right? I mean, that's not really dealt with within this film, but that is one of the reasons why you get diversification in initiatives within police forces is that it's very difficult for white male cops to be women. There was a period at which they were dressing up, in drag, right? Literally to try to catch people. And then, you know, to be black, right? Or to police other racialized communities, right? And so there's like a real purpose for it for, policing within United States capitalist society. But yeah, it's nefarious where you get and also again the glorification of the jailhouse rat, of the snitch, right? Because again, that is what Hammond is like he's doing this out of self-interest. um, you know, and in reality it would be to lessen his own sentence or something like that. But here, because they're dealing with this weird, thing about the money and, this kind of 48-hour, it's not an actual he's not an approved informant or snitch in the way that you would be for the FBI, right? It's like kind of this special deal. But anyway, yeah.
But that's a really good point, and I didn't think about that because think about in the 80s, the amount of public information campaigns that were then like developed, right? Citizens basically, tell on people who were doing shit, right? You even got like, I mean, that was big. That was like one of the big graffiti things that they did here in New York was to basically be like, you know, in the independent hotlines, right? And you're helping the quality of life in the city if you do this and all this type of stuff. And what like Reggie Hammond, because Reggie Hammond's redemption comes through his ability to become more cop like, right? And Kate's, who is shown to be the archetype of the smartest, most ethical in terms of his like moral standing to kind of like get the villains cop. Um, the fact that he can recognize it and this like dimwit, loudmouth black person can't, it shows you that like Reggie is now worthy of redemption and trust, and it's through the guise of him basically becoming a cop, right? Like that is his compliment towards Reggie, the fact that he's the best cop he's ever worked with. I mean, it's fucking trash, right? And so they do like the typical movie thing where you kind of get the thing where they don't know where they are and they're in the bar because he's supposed to take him back to jail, and he's like, well, you don't want to go back to jail just yet, right? And they're gonna go have a drink, and they're now buddies, and he's basically like, hey, you know, you should go see your girl. And you're like, oh well, she's mad at me. Da, da, da. Well, do you think Billy would go see his girl? It's like it's really bad. It's like a really really bad kind of like tie up. I don't think so. And he's like, but you told me that's what people would do if they're like sad. They would go see their girl, right? Oh, well, let's go check it out, right? And of course, they go back to, I think it's Chinatown, right? Or they go back to Chinatown, right? And
Well, this is the first time that they go to Chinatown, right? Like I
yeah,
think it
what?
is, but
No, I think they went before because it's somehow I think when they go to because they go
oh, that's
essentially
right. To
back
girls.
back to
Yeah,
their
that's right.
apartment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So they go back there, and they follow Billy's baby girlfriend. you know, it's pretty quickly discovered that she was, I guess, lying, or Billy was able to convince her. It's not really clear if like it was a long lie or if it was like a convincing thing. and basically Billy's upstairs. Gans is with the other woman, right? Right, and you get your kind of final showdown where they go in and basically go into their final gun battle with Billy and Gans. And they do this thing where they basically Gans is going to be chased by Kate's, and Billy is going to be taken by Reggie. And Reggie first walks into a room, right? And you see a shirtless, I mean, this scene is so fucking, it's like icky. You see a shirtless Billy, right? And he has like a big ass knife, right? Right. And he basically like freeze, right? And like Reggie's even shaking a little bit with the gun, which I found inconsistent. I'm like, why is Reggie suddenly scared? But I guess you gotta this is what you gotta do to show that like Billy is like some supernatural like high level of evil that even Reggie's a little bit scared. He ain't been scared the whole fucking movie, but it is Billy, right? And Billy just like does like the stand up, right? Like basically like accepting death, or like I can catch a bullet, or like you're not gonna shoot me type shit, right?
It's literally the same scene from Predator almost.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't cut his chest this time, but
But he
like he
has
has the same Bowie knife, right? Like, yeah, and he's like, I'm
it's
ready
so
to
true.
go. Like, I'm gonna take you
I'm
on.
ready.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take you on, even though I know death. But he has this like laugh, right? It's so maniacal. And Reggie shoots him, right? And he kills him, and he's dead. And it's just like Billy's character is just like it's so demonic, right? It's not even a character. It's like a walking demon, right? And then they start the part where they're chasing Gans, and it's like visually convoluted because Gans gets out the thing and he basically heads downstairs. There's the part that I can't stand also is basically like Gans Gans, like when he goes into the room with the girlfriend starts fighting Kate's. Like, why? Why does she want to beat up Kate's for Gans? It makes no sense, right? And they kind of do a big wraparound. What it all ends up to is because then Reggie's starting to look for Gans, because Gans also has the money, right? And Gans eventually like is able to like subdue Reggie, right? And he eventually gets Reggie, right? And in his clutches. And they do is what we were talking about earlier. They go totally into the Western cowboy. It gets super misty. He's in Chinatown. I mean, like they really overdo the visuals on this one. Like he does this thing with his body suddenly where he's like, like it's funny, like everybody has their guns up, but like, his hands are down with the gun. Like it's just so fucking like it's so over the top, right? And you get your final sequence, and like the brutality of the end of this shit is pretty intense because like Reggie, he's holding Reggie. I forget what Reggie says, but he says something. And like basically Gant's whole thing is like, you're not gonna shoot,
He
right?
said, yeah. So Hammond says, take aim and blow his fucking brains out. And then Gans says, bullshit. He ain't going to try. Right, cop. And then Kate's like, it's such a bad shot too, because he pulls up his gun and he shoots before his gun is like even like it's like a kind of like this, and shoots him. Like he doesn't take aim, right? And then, of course, yeah, Hammond says, "Are you crazy, man? I was just bluffing." And then Gan says, "I don't believe it. I got shot."
Wait, I don't believe it. I got shot. The way he
Yeah.
says it, it's so. But you know what though? It's a terrible line. I feel for James Remar. He must have
It
read
is a
this fucking
terrible line.
script. He must have been like, Walter, really, dude?
And then Nolte's line is, "You're done. End of story," right? And then Gans runs at him and says, "You." And that's when Kate unloads, shoots him 6 times.
Oh
Um
man.
a couple other things just about this scene quickly. I mean, one is, so for a brief period in this, Kate's takes, I guess it's Billy Bear's girl hostage. Um, and I think this is important, right? Because it's like this is the tactic that Kate's used throughout, is to use a woman as a human shield. And they're sort of saying again, like, to be the kind of cop who's going to be able to take out the cop killer, you got to be able to do everything, including using some poor woman as a human shield, basically, and going in and using her hostage as you're moving through the space. And then, yeah, you get that scene where Gans then has Hammond, and it's the mist, the neon lights from Chinatown. I mean, it's very, neo cowboy. Um, and but the point, the lesson, right, that Kate's has been supposed to have learned throughout all of this, right, is you can't negotiate with these people, you can't reason with them. The only way to go after a cop killer is to just blur all the lines, right? You just go in guns blazing, you take the woman hostage, all of those things, right? And this is all justified because he gets it done, and that's what needs to happen, right? And so again, to the narratives that we were talking about within the 80s. And there's another thing I want to bring up before we get out of here, is Cop Shot, actually, which starts in New York in the 80s. Um, oh, you don't know this? I'm surprised them to me. So let me pull
I
this
do,
up
but
real quick.
maybe I do, but it's been, I might have
So
never pulled
there
it.
was a Cop Shot line that started in the 80s, but it's actually like a nonprofit organization. So you could still they still have a website, still exists. If people would
Oh,
remember this
of
symbol.
course. That logo
Um,
of I remember the
y-
logo. Of course
yeah.
the logo. I remember it. Yeah.
This is from their webpage. It's still here. Who is Cop Shot? We are an organization of business executives and professionals from the New York metropolitan area whose regard and concern for the safety of law enforcement officers is based on one premise. If there is a breakdown in respect for the men and women in blue who are sworn to protect and serve us, then what chance does the average citizen have? Right. And that's the same fucking line, basically, almost word for word, that they got the black police chief to say to Nick Nolte's character, to Kate's, in the thing, is like, if the cops are gonna be killed, then everything, right? So then this becomes that the cop killer is actually the worst form of criminal that there is, right? Which again, it connects, like, 1 year after Mumia is captured, this film comes out, right? This is definitely a part of the ruling class response to stuff like the BLA.
I memory hold that logo. I do
Yeah.
remember it, and I don't think I ever actually looked into what it really meant, other than like the actual logo. Shit, that's fucking wild, dude. Oh man. So yeah, so he basically shoots Gans. The villain is got, right. We can all breathe easy that they've done this, right. The other thing is, like, Reggie's is like even surprised by, like, Cates's, like, high level of brutality, right. Um and immediately cut to Reggie getting some trim finally. So he finally gets to realize. I always find it funny that, like, this woman has just been waiting for Reggie. Like, and even the way she's even gonna wait for him for 6 months. Like, I'll take you to get some to eat. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, oh my god.
And he hands her money and she says, "I'm not a pro. I told
Yeah,
you." And he's like, "That's okay. Buy yourself something nice." Like,
yeah. I would have did it, but I gotta go. Basically, I mean, it's so perverse. It's like, and like, even when, like, he leaves, she has this kind of like, I've had the greatest night of my life with Reggie Hammond. Like, look, it's just so whack. Right. And then, yeah, and they even have, like, the conversation at the end, because Jack basically is like, you know, talk to him, and then there's like the real, sexualized black man thing. I was great, like, it's just, and they go in, they get in the car, and you have their final sequence, which I just think is, like, super important, right? So a couple of things happen in the final sequences. First, the money, right? And Cates basically tells him that, like, you know, I'll the money will be waiting for you. But there is a deal made between the two of them that Cates can buy a new car.
Yeah, this is where you get that part. I was placing it earlier, but
Yeah,
yeah, it does
that
happen
Cates
here.
can buy a new car, right? And when it's done in this fashion in this sequence, it's more like it makes Cates's kind of get from it doesn't seem sullied. They find a way to like unsully like him basically taking like criminal money for himself, right? Because Reggie has kind of earned it. He should be able to get the money. It is drug dealer money anyway, right? So it's like, what are you gonna do? You know?
It's funny. It's the same premise as Training Day, actually, on some
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
And it of course is, I mean, Training Day is coming in to be, you know, I would say critical of this kind of, police corruption of robbing drug dealers and hoarding money and all this kind of stuff. But in this movie, it's actually like it's definitely being seen as like, yeah, that's fine. Like this is an ethical thing. Like but it's so weird too because the whole idea that a cop has is going to let somebody have $500,000 for themselves that they stole.
No. Well, because then the other part is what becomes interesting. So when they get back into the car, um, a conversation ensues about Reggie, being rehabilitated, right? And Cates has to assure him. He basically is like, "Look, if you come back out and you are a criminal again, I'm going to get you." And Reggie assures him, well, and then no, Reggie kind of like makes like a line like, "You couldn't." Does he you say you wouldn't catch me or something like that, or does he go like, isn't that what he says essentially?
He says, "What makes you think that you could catch me? If I decide to become a thief, what makes you think you could catch me?" And he says, "Could I have my lighter back,
Lighter
Reggie?"
back,
and
right?
then
And
and then you
Reggie
get
like,
the Eddie Murphy laugh, and the boys are back in town plays, and
right, and he gives him the light, and he gives him the lighter back, right? Doesn't he give him the lighter back? Do we see it? We see it, and like it's
Mm.
very light, but it is the final like disciplining moment where Reggie has accepted the discipline. Like he now understands the kind of parameters in the world in which he can live. Um and like for the movie to end in that way, right? It's like Reggie, he's able to gain the respect of a cop, but the cop has to remind him that if you do actually step out of line and go back, it's like the parole officer, right? It's like the famous movie, right? I always think of like Shawshank Redemption when they would have those like recurring scene of Morgan Freeman going to the parole board, right? And he has to constantly say that he's why he's been rehabilitated, right? And in this sequence, it's like Reggie's like having like his rehabilitation conversation, but also letting him know, like, okay, great. We don't want to see you back here, but if you step out of line, you will go back here. Right. And Reggie accepts it, you
Yeah.
know, and he it's like he understands the new parameters of existence. And in this like 48 hour experience with this white cop. And then the boys are back in town. But shout out to Thin Lizzy. Thin Lizzy was dope. Shout out to Thin Lizzy. So
Agreed. Um, all right. I mean, do you want to say any more, like, because you talked about how you think about this in terms of kind of a metaphor or whatever
oh, for
for
Eddie.
Eddie Murphy's career.
So Eddie Murphy, and I mentioned it before. Eddie, oh, hold on, drop my headphone. Um, Eddie Murphy in a joint interview he did with Spike Lee, he talked about when he went to Hollywood and his earliest success happened, he experienced a sort of fascination with him as like a figure. He tells this story about how Burt Reynolds wanted to have lunch with him, and Burt barely talked. He said Burt basically wanted to like look at him. Um, and then he said that like directors would only work with him to kind of like get to the next level. He said the only one he ever at that time, the only one he ever really felt really had a care for him was John Landis, who did Coming to America and Trading Places. We can say that's just his opinion. And what's kind of happened with Eddie, and then Eddie, but in the story, he expresses this kind of idea that like I was this exotic character in Hollywood, right? I would pitch certain things. I didn't know how to kind of operate, right? And when I did certain things, they would kind of rein me in, right? And he became, I mean, Eddie admitted he became by like the 90s, he became very isolated. He got very, he was very paranoid. He in the article he would say shit, he said the shit like he has like his apartment checked for bugs constantly. Right. And I'm not saying he didn't have a certain kind of thoughts to be that. He kind of isolated himself from people. And he said, like, I was like an exotic character. And Hollywood. And then the other thing that kind of happened was when he had his first big fall, the Hollywood press just like kind of like went at him like really hard, right? And then he had other things and things that like, and this is not to say that Eddie's a clean person because Eddie has his own shit with like the homophobia in the stand-ups that are just really bad. Um some of the sexism in some of the stand-ups and stuff like that, and things that he engaged with. And then he said whenever he tried to like do certain types of projects within Hollywood, there would always be like he felt like there was like a limit to what he could do. And he said he was never able to build real lasting relationships with anyone. And it always felt like he was stifled in that kind of way. So when you watch 48 Hours, it's interesting because it's like it's Eddie's someone who kind of escaped into Hollywood. Because even when 40, like if you think about his first two movies, 48 Hours, more than half of the people thought it wouldn't work, and his career would just kind of like falter off. And then Trading Places, he got because they saw the dailies from 48 Hours. And even then, they didn't have a lot of faith. And then another thing that kind of happened, and Eddie did admit this, a good amount of his 80s movies, even Beverly Hills Cop, he wasn't actually the first choice. He was actually like the third or fourth sometimes. And then they kept being surprised that it would be successful. And kind of then when he had unsuccessful films, they were like, okay, great. We can kind of stop fucking with this Eddie Murphy guy some more. And then he had his like resurgence, but then, that's all been complicated with like different stuff. And this is
Yeah,
probably
well,
why he's very cagey.
his big resurgence comes with The Nutty Professor too, right? So it's like
Exactly.
a very specific, yeah.
Right. And he kind of changes his whole thing with Nutty Professor, then has like his second kind of fall down after like those next series of movies as he tries to become a more wholesome character or actor, right? And then there's also, and I don't know if he talked about it or if it's other people who have said it about him. When he didn't win the Oscar, he believes that it was them fuck, or at least this is how he takes it, because he was like the odds-on favorite to win for Dreamgirls, and the fact that he didn't win. Remember, like, the rumors he left. Because he didn't go to Oscars. They said after he lost, he walked out. So he felt it was like another like one Hollywood like slapping him, right? And it's like, so he has it's like Reggie Hammond in life, right? And you know, my thing with Eddie is like that I always get frustrated with people like Eddie Murphy is like, well, if Hollywood's treating you that bad, step out of it and let's do some real shit. But he doesn't have those politics. he is a very self-absorbed, self-contained guy, right? And that's his
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah, you can see that. I mean, I mentioned before that I watched the little like documentary with him that's on Netflix, which is, I mean, calling it a documentary is like, it's like sort of like a biopic, like that he gets to direct himself. It's very um self-mythologizing and all of that kind of stuff. But you could see that. I mean, it's very obvious, and he's quite open about it of like, "Look, I just live out here in the middle of nowhere, you know, with my family, and like, sometimes I'm like, get them out of here." Like he's just sort of like very, very isolated and individual kind of person, and also has gone through divorces and that kind of stuff too. But yeah,
Like the
and then
stuff with
somebody
him
made
and
it
yeah, I mean, I know that we'll bring that up. All the stuff with him and Melanie B. Like he has a
mhm.
lot of stuff out there, and I think we're talking about the same thing about the
With a
trans woman
trans
that passed
woman
away.
discussion. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
This
yeah,
is like in the
yeah, and it
90s.
was,
I
yeah,
remember this, and it was pretty like intense, and then like it just went away.
yeah, it was a big deal at the time. Yeah. But it did kind of just go away, and nobody talks about it anymore. It's not like a thing that ever comes up anymore, as like it didn't come up, I don't think, at all in that documentary, which is like, this is kind of a big event in all of this stuff that was going on. And they did the whole thing about him being upset about SNL like not inviting him back, and then I think trashing Norbit or one of those movies, right? Like, and talking about kind of his decline and all of that. And look, I mean, like, should Lauren Michaels and Norm Macdonald and all those people been more, you know, whatever, gracious to a star who was a huge part of like building their institution? Sure, on some kind of like, but what was kind of excised about that is like that there was controversy as well, and like weird stuff, and people had very kind of conflicted feelings about Eddie Murphy at a certain point, and part of that was related to the trans woman, and like how that was all discussed and what people did or didn't know about what was going on there and all of that. But yeah, anyway. um Well, yeah, it may have gone away because she died, but I guess the part of it too was that none of it was just sort of let go of. Like, it wasn't a discussion of like what really was going on there or any of that.
Yeah, I mean, and it is a larger commentary on our society on like who's worthy of attention in their death and abuse, right? Right. And then of course
Yeah.
someone like Eddie Murphy's star is going to be protected in that kind of way. And he'll have the ability because of his massive connections, you know, to make things like that. I hate to say it, go away.
Yeah, I didn't know all of these details, but he was suing several trans sex workers for saying they were with him. I think he pulled the lawsuit. She fell from a building. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. The
yeah,
lawsuit I remember. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so anyways, there's a lot of that there that's, like, not is just kind of, I think many people wouldn't even know that at this point because it's just not, it's kind of written out of history of all of it,
Mm-mm.
you know?
Mm-mm.
Um, alright. So we have a few different things in the chat I'll just go through quickly. Chitty Matcha, the question I was gonna ask you, because as you said, this is your neck of the woods, is we were talking about, you said this is always a film I tell people to watch to understand where I lived for 7 years. I've seen everything and so react to nothing the way other people do. Um, I mean, the question that we had earlier was the bar scene in particular, and them placing this redneck Confederate bar within the Mission District, and it being this all white, like it's like a pseudo topless bar basically, because there's like the woman there with pasties on and all of that. Like, whether that, it seemed like a contrivance to us. I think, even though we recognize, of course, that there is there that like the redneck and the Confederate iconography in the early 80s, would have been in places in California and stuff like that, but we just felt like putting it in the Mission was a strange choice.
Yeah.
But anyways, curious if you have any thoughts on that. Her name was Shalimar Seuli. Thank you. All right. So other stuff as Chitty Matcha maybe is offering some response to that. Jay asked, has anybody ever written a comparison of Richard Pryor's stand-up with Eddie Murphy's from a Black radical or Afro pessimist perspective? I don't know.
I don't know if I've seen written. Man, I mean, it used to be in conversation about Richard, about the qualitative shifts in the politics from Richard to Eddie to like Chappelle. I remember when Chappelle, people used to talk about that and like Richard's, um, how he framed the kind of world, and then pretty much saying that like a kind of like a certain degradation of like understanding that can kind of go through each one. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure maybe have written it, but I'd be very curious. But I know it was in the discourse heavily. I talked to a lot of I talked to people a lot about that. We were talking about like the politics of like Chappelle versus Eddie, and then versus Richard Pryor, and then like people in between and around like Bernie Mac and so forth and so on. It definitely came up a lot in conversation, but I don't know if anything's been written. But if it has, I would love to see it.
Yeah, it would be really interesting. Um, Thanks. Glad folks. That episode with Jemima Pierre is very good.
Yeah,
I
Jimmy is
definitely
great.
recommend people. Yeah, she's awesome. Um, yeah, I mean Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy for sure had beef.
Yeah, I
I
mean
mean I don't
Eddie
know, beef
says
might be, but yeah,
no,
they
no,
did.
no, no.
They
I mean it's
there
more
was
like
beef.
Richard. Eddie took it as Richard then had beef with him. Like Eddie was very disappointed because he saw Richard as like his idol, and I just think it's one of those things where like they got pitted against each other, and it just soured, but Eddie was always very like depressed about it. Like he can't he talks about it like very, very sadly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's clear even in that little documentary thing, like he does this whole hilarious thing where he has puppets that he's created of Richard. Who else is it? It's Richard, Bill Cosby. And he has them having conversations and does the
Yeah.
voices of both of them. But it's clear that, he had so much yeah,
To answer
respect and
someone's
influence for Richard Pryor. Yeah.
to answer the question about Harlem Nights, it's probably you can find it, Google it. Like they beefed during it. Like Richard wouldn't do stuff, and like Eddie talked. I think he talks about it in the Spike Lee interview. He talks about it like, yeah, like Richard wouldn't do shit. He wouldn't. I mean, that's where it kind of like it basically boiled over, and like it blew up. Was on the Harlem Nights set because remember Eddie directed Harlem Nights,
Yeah.
which he didn't want to do, which is also another funny story.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do that one. That's at 89, so we'll have to do that at some point. Yeah. Yeah. Look forward to that. Appreciated this. This is what I thought. That seemed like a contrivance. SF's racism is incognito. That type of flagrant display would never fly in those neighborhoods, in my opinion and my experience. That's kind of my thoughts too. I mean,
Felt like it.
I spent a decent. I had a friend, family friend that lived in the Mission, or near the Mission, and then we used to go there like late 80s and the 90s, and like there was plenty, like the liberalism and all that stuff that was all there. It was definitely undergoing intense gentrification at that time, but the idea of a Confederate bar in, I don't think so. Um, all right, Clint Eastwood and Richard Pryor, never gonna happen. I have to say, like in my mind, that is such a funny, like on certain levels, the movie might have been even better. Not, Eddie Murphy, I think, is a better actor than Richard Pryor, but the idea of Clint Eastwood in the role of, like, yeah,
He's so stiff. The thing about Clint,
yeah.
like he's so. Oh man.
Imagine the fight scene between the
Yeah, yeah. You better do it, Spirit Chucker. Make my day, Spirit Chucker. Oh my god, so bad.
Yeah, we have to do Under Fire, I think. You know, this
Oh
is a Nick Nolte
yeah.
film that is about Nicaragua, albeit through the white activist types again. There's a few of these movies, and it's such a weird, yeah,
Nolte has a
interesting.
strange movie career too. If you just dig through his movies, he does weird shit.
What's up, Jab? Pryor
Yeah.
and Eastwood is we'll
Let's
have
do
to do
Missing.
Missing.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
almost did it recently. We are gonna do it pretty soon.
yeah. This is a great point. This I think was one of the movies that was on my mind is Bulletproof, which I watched a ton I mean, that was like there was a there was a period of my life where we watched that movie constantly. Um, all right. There's a lot of black Hollywood buddy propaganda movies who are informers, traitors, spies, undercovers, mentors. Recently watched Reservoir Dogs and noticed this too. Yeah. Yeah.
The dude who trains Tim Roth, and I hate that movie, but is a black man on how to be a snitch, on how to be an undercover.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mhm.
And there's like, yeah, it's weird. I mean, that's Tarantino though. He has such
I
weird
know
race politics.
Tarantino's.
We don't even got to go there.
Um, Shout out to JMP. As if most cops were liberal wimps and you needed the maverick asshole to be a tough on crime, right? Like that is the trope. Um, there was an entire trope of asshole cop being cool. Dirty Harry archetype was already mentioned, but it's pretty common. Cobra is a great example. That's another movie we're gonna have to do, soon with Sylvester Stallone. Um, So the question is, why is propaganda so popular with the imperialist core working class, international consumer class? So I do have some thoughts on this. I mean, I think one is obviously it's popular with the ruling class and it's heavily promoted by the ruling class. But I do think that and some other folks have said this in the chat, that this is where you get in within capital what capital has become comfortable with in terms of Hollywood films and all of this, that where you get an image of the quote unquote working class, right, figure that you're supposed to identify within films, it is very often the police officer, right? And obviously we can sit here and say, well, we don't actually think cops are part of the working class, right? They're violence workers for capital and so on. But like if you're just not politicized in the way that we are, right? You look at what's on offer on TV or in Hollywood, and where are you going to find representations of, somebody who's struggling with their job and, dealing with, a lot of the things that people might escape into to get away, to get away from they hate going to work and all this kind of stuff. And it's heavily promoted that propaganda is kind of like the one outlet for that is on offer, right? You don't see a lot of, shows that are about teachers. Like even when you think of something like Abbott Elementary, right? Like the teachers they're mostly like love teaching, which I get, but it's like you don't actually see their lives outside of the classroom very much in Abbott or out of the school very much in Abbott Elementary. It's like the workplace comedy stuff slash, of course you have the inept administrator and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there just aren't very many outlets as part of what I would say, or very many things within Hollywood film and television. I mean, you can go through it, like, so much of what we have available to us, much more than at any other point, I think, within TV or film history, is some version or variant of propaganda, like, that is so, it's kinda like the alternative is to not like movies or to be much more creative in what you're seeking out to consume from a film or TV perspective, which obviously there is other stuff, but it's not what's promoted or marketed to you. Uh, Yeah, this is a good point. That this was about the Super Bowl thing. I didn't even think about Bad Bunny through that kind of lens of like, but it is true. Even in a lot of the discussions I've seen on mainstream news around Puerto Rico, they've been about how sending all the military down there to stage for these wars against Venezuela and Cuba is like helping the economy of these like business, the tourist industry and these businesses that are set up around the military base and all that kind of bullshit. Um, we did, yeah, both of us. What that was the movie we did, right? The Blue
Yeah, we did
Collar.
it. Yeah, and we
Yeah,
were talking in chat about Paul Schrader because Paul Schrader did this movie with
yeah,
Nick Nolte called Affliction in the
yep.
90s. That's a very
I
weird,
remember Affliction.
weird,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
weird working class has fallen movie. Just
yeah,
and
yeah,
Nolte, he's extra Nolte.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And this is the point. Yeah, Paul, you were the one who mentioned this
Oof.
earlier. The true working class man carries a gun and protects the innocent, or something. Yeah, exactly. Um, and that's very tied in also with settler colonialism too. Like the whole idea of, again, when you see the connections between westerns and policing movies, nowadays, um, and this idea also of needing to operate outside of the law or go beyond the kind of what's acceptable. I mean, these are all like settler narratives. Um, the idea of liberalism leading people to think racism is a mindset thing with no economic impact. It's completely postmodern. There couldn't be possibly be a connection between the two. Yeah. Um, and also attempting to draw in the working class that are being put in the same position as the drug addict, wealthy investor, and professional classes, continued criminals, poverty in the country. Yeah, I think I get the point that you're making there too. Is just this idea too of like, I mean, the whole idea of the category of the citizen, also as it talks about, or they said, what did they say? The unarmed civilian or something like that is what they referred to in terms of the cop killer, right? Is this idea that that everyone should unify around this protection of the cop, right? As if cops are, you know, protect everybody's interests so long as you're abiding by the law. So if you're a law abiding citizen, quote unquote, right, that like it's totally to your stake to be protective of this person, right? Which, feeds heavily into like the very reactionary, like back the blue lives matter kind of, politics and so on. But there are a lot of people who believe that, who buy into this notion of, this thin blue line that protects, you know, the innocent people in society from chaos and all this other shit. And it's got biblical, there's biblical kind of resonances and all this kind of stuff. So yeah. Anyway. All right. Anything else, to me? No.
No, no, no. It was good to do this one. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a doozy, and I think, and I do really do think if you analyze it, it's an instructive movie on how to see a lot more American films more broadly because it's so on the nose if you like are willing to kind of accept what it's on the nose about, you know. We will not be doing the sequel. It sucks. It's bad. It's just a bad movie. Actually, it might even be 90. But
It's 90.
yeah, good. It just is bad and it doesn't make sense actually. It actually doesn't make sense. It's a really bad movie. But
I'd have to go back and I don't even remember it. I know I saw it,
well
but
the
this
whole
is the one that was much more memorable to me.
yeah, I mean to spoil they basically rewrite it that the drug dealer is in the original movie. It's just
Drug
badly
dealer.
done. The drug dealer they stole the money from is in the original
Oh,
is in the original 48 Hours,
got it.
and it doesn't really work. It's kind of stupid. So
Not surprising. The people who made this movie are not very smart, but
no,
they
they're
they
not.
they
They're not at all. They're not at all. Well, we will do some more Walter Hill stuff because he's pretty like He has a lot of movies that are just like the you know about Imperial, Sir Mr. Walter Hill, dude.
Yeah, he has a very interesting IMDb page. Just there's
Oh
all
yeah,
kinds of
he
stuff.
has
Yeah,
another movie. Doesn't he have that? Doesn't he do that Border Patrol movie? What is it called? Isn't that Walter Hill? I think he has a
probably.
Border
Let's see.
Patrol movie. Does he have the one with Jack Nicholson?
I mean,
Is
even
that
when you
him?
look at him, you're like, oh my
No,
god,
with Nick Nolte, Extreme President, Extreme Prejudice. We have to
Prejudice.
do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No,
Extreme
we have to do
Prejudice.
that one. Yeah,
That one we have to do. It's a Border Patrol movie. Ugh.
yeah, yeah,
Like I said, Nick Nolte's career, bro. Weird.
yeah. He also, he gets involved in the Aliens movies too, which is interesting.
Yeah,
Walter Hill does.
I mean, Nolte's also kind of everywhere. He
Yeah,
gets plucked in so many movies. He's such a they're like the Prince of Tides. Oh, I mean, he's
yeah,
just strange. He's a strange, strange
yeah,
guy. His movie career, but loved
yeah,
by Hollywood. They love him. They love him.
yeah. I think my parents like Prince of Tides, if I remember
Oh
correctly.
yeah, for a certain generation of people, Prince of Tides was like was a flick. That was a flick. I don't think I've ever finished it. He does that when he does his dramas and he yells so much. I'm like, dude, I feel like you're about to like blow a gasket.
He does that very well. He did like the
Yeah.
drunken, like angry, like big white guy. Like he's yeah.
So I will say, is it a Sidney Lumet film that he did called Q&A? It's with Charles Dutton is in it. What's his name? Is it Timothy Hutton? Might be Timothy Hutton. He's really good. He plays a crooked racist cop in New York, and he's like this in this one. Like he's meant to be seen as racist. It's like he's really really good. And it was written by Edwin Torres, who wrote the Carlito's Way books.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back next week. We haven't quite set next
Yeah,
week's
figure that
movie,
out.
but
Yeah.
we will let y'all know within the next day or so. So we'll see you all next Monday. Anything you want to mention?
Oh, my episode with Alex Avina will go up to the public tomorrow. We did a really good conversation talking about Duck You Sucker, El Topo, and Black God White Devil by Globo Rocha. We had a really good convo. Check out some of the previous ones I did with like Stephen Shihai. If people haven't checked it out, that was really great. And shout out to Stephen for that. And some really good ones coming down the pike. I just recorded with Gemma DeCristo. We had a really great conversation that should be coming in like a few weeks. So yeah, some really good stuff. So check out what we got going on over.
Awesome. All right. Peace, everybody. Make sure to like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Support us on Patreon. We will get you all some new bonus content as soon as we can figure that out. So anyways, appreciate it, everybody.
Peace, y'all.